Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second committee meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Commerce and Labor. Ms. Thomas, please call the roll.
Senator Lang.
Here.
Senator Settlemeyer.
Here.
Senator Spearman.
Present.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Chair Howdigi.
Present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. It looks like all committee members are present. Thank you, members, for joining us this morning, and thank you for those tuning in online to watch us as well. Before we begin, I would like to go over our normal housekeeping items. Members, please remember to keep your video turned on during the meeting to ensure that we have a quorum at all times. Please remember to mute yourself when you are not speaking and unmute yourself to speak, and then mute yourself when you are done. This just helps eliminate background noise. Meeting materials can be accessed on the committee's webpage. Anyone who would like to receive electronic notification and access to the committee meetings agendas, minutes, and final report can do so by signing up on the Nevada Legislature's website. There will be a time for public comment at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, and public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Today's virtual format is important to keep everyone safe, and I want the public to know that public comment may be given in 4 different ways, all of which are listed on the committee meetings agenda, but I will go over as well. The first method to participate is by calling 669-900-6833, entering the meeting ID number 874-6771-6789, and then pressing the pound sign. You can also email your public comment to clinterim@lcb.state.nv.us. You can also mail your written public comment to the Research Division at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada, 89701. And the last method is by faxing your public comment into 775-684-6400. Before we get started with public comment, I would like to let committee members and presenters and anyone else who is joining us on Zoom know that the Zoom chat is specifically reserved to communicate with IT and VPS for any technical assistance that you may need. Please, I would like to again remind everyone, please do not write any questions in the committee or in the Zoom chat. All questions must be made verbally so that they can be documented for public record. Again, Zoom chat is specifically reserved only for technical assistance requested to VPS or IT. With that, let us get started. Again, public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and in addition, comment will be available at the meeting. My intention is to take 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, and then we will take the remainder of public comment at the end. VPS, please add the first caller with public comment to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. To participate in public comment, please press the raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to participate in public comment, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone. Okay, Chair, it appears that there are no participants wishing to speak at this time in public comment.
Thank you so much, VPS. Okay, we can move on to our next agenda item. I'm really excited about today's agenda because the focus of our meeting is on occupational and professional licensing, an area I've got to learn over my last 3 terms on commerce and labor. At our last meeting, it was noted that the Nevada regulates more than 50 different occupational groups. Independent boards oversee most of them, with the remainder administered through state agencies or officials. During the last legislative session, the Commerce and Labor Committee heard many bills relating to occupational and professional licensing. We actually heard 26 bills relating to this subject that were passed in 2021. Our first item on the agenda is a presentation on national trends in occupational licensing. Most state licenses are governed at the state level and requirements vary by state, which require workers who move to apply for a new license. Matt Schaefer and Caitlin Bison with the Council of State Governments will provide an overview of best practices in state licensing directed at allowing states to safeguard consumers while maintaining a modern regulatory system that meets the needs of workers and businesses. Mr. Schaefer and Ms. Bison, I believe you are with us. I saw you sign on. So when you are ready to begin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just share my screen here briefly. And before I hand it off to Caitlin, I just wanted to give a brief introduction about the Council of State Governments. So CSG is a nonpartisan membership association that serves all three branches of state government. So we provide policy resources, we respond to research requests, we host a lot of convenings and leadership development for legislators, but also governor's staff and the judiciary to help promote excellence in state government. So we have 4 regional offices, including CSG West, that's headquartered in Sacramento, that some of you all may be familiar with, but we're excited to be with you today. And I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin to run through our presentation, and we'll both be available for question and answer after the presentation. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Bison, and I'm a policy analyst with Council of State Governments. And like Matt mentioned, just if you have any questions, please save them for the end, and we will answer them best we can. So next slide, please. So to begin, we're going to start with a bit of Occupational Licensure 101. Occupational licensure protects public health and safety by requiring practitioners of certain professions, such as healthcare, massage therapy, social work, and other fields, to undergo certain training and education, as well as enforce oversights in any cases where harm occurs. For the most part, each state has full autonomy over licensure and determines what education and training will be required to obtain licensure, including other factors such as a criminal record. In the 1950s, licensed workers accounted for only 5% of the employed population, but over the last 6 years, the number of jobs requiring an occupational license has grown to 25%, or nearly 1 in 4. And for healthcare, this number is even higher, with about 3 in 4 healthcare occupations requiring a license. So with this growth, the requirements for professions across states remain fairly inconsistent and can make it difficult for workers to move across state lines. Next slide. So with this increase in licensed professions, as well as differences in licensure requirements across state lines, certain barriers to licensure can arise. The first would be the cost of licensure, either in terms of monetary cost, time, or opportunity cost. For monetary costs, the fees for licensure, exams, and other materials they might need to be able to meet their state's requirements can be a barrier to licensure for example, low-income workers. And depending on a lot of different factors, the licensure process can also take a bit of time from people while they wait for their application to be processed, the time spent fulfilling education and experience requirements, and the time studying for exams. And lastly, while working to fulfill licensure requirements, there is an opportunity cost in a way in not spending that time working in another profession. And as I mentioned before, these barriers can also hinder certain populations considerably more. For example, military spouses, veterans, and immigrants often have difficulties with states recognizing their prior experiences and may have to go through certain education and trainings a second time in order to obtain license. Many states also have maybe a good moral character clause that can hinder individuals with criminal records from obtaining licensure, even if their criminal record was unrelated to the profession's scope of practice. Next slide, please. So with these barriers to licensure, we have found that increasing licensure mobility and portability can aid with a number of things, including fulfilling workforce shortages in certain professions, improving access to telehealth for those who want to practice in multiple states, aiding in the licensure process of specific populations, such as I mentioned with military spouses who might have to move to multiple different states in a short amount of time, and aiding in disaster relief efforts, as we saw in the beginning of the pandemic and even today. So states have been working to remove these barriers to licensure and increase license portability in a number of different ways. With this, we have seen many trends popping up in how states approach this issue, including targeted reform for specific populations, universal license recognition policies, enacting interstate compacts, changing their regulatory structure, implementing digital licensing systems, and expanding apprenticeships. So I will now kind of go over each of these trends in a bit more detail and give some state examples. And so the first trend will be for targeted reform for specific populations. To begin, we do see reform and legislation surrounding targeted populations. It's usually for reducing time to licensure for these three disproportionately affected populations. You see here individuals with criminal records, military spouses or members, veterans, and immigrants with work authorization. Next slide, please. So to get a little more specific, for individuals with criminal records, some trends we've seen in states is legislation that can be categorized as fair chance licensing policies. These include provisions that prohibit denial of licensure based on convictions without a direct or substantial relationship to the duties of the occupation. So far, 40 states have a standard that the convictions must have a direct or substantial relationship to the occupation. Also, most states with a direct or substantial relationship provisions also include requirements to consider each conviction with an individualized approach. This could include reviewing each conviction in question and considering factors such as the nature of the offense, the age of the applicant when the crime occurred, the number of years since convictions, and other factors such as that. So as of now, about 26 states have such policies in place, and there are also pre-qualification provisions in 19 states that set up avenues for individuals with criminal records to petition a licensing board to determine whether that individual's criminal history disqualifies them from licensure before they formally apply. And lastly, in 28 states, there are provisions requiring licensing boards to provide a written response to an applicant on why their particular criminal history prohibits them from being licensed. Next slide, please. So moving now on to military spouses and veterans, many states provide them with a number of ways to reduce their time to licensure. With licensure by endorsement, this allows military trained applicants to have been awarded a military occupational specialty, and military spouse applicants who are licensed in another jurisdiction to receive certain occupational licenses in their state. Almost all states allow military spouses to receive a temporary license upon relocating, which allows an individual to practice their profession while fulfilling requirements needed to qualify for a permanent license, or while awaiting verification of documents to support an endorsement. Additionally, at least 35 states afford military spouses an expedited review for licensure in order to ease the time burden placed on them. And a few states also provide exemption from licensure for military spouses and veterans and assistance with fees for military spouses. Next slide. So the last targeted population we'll talk about is immigrants with work authorization. There are around 2 million unemployed or underemployed college-educated immigrants in the US. At least 60% of them hold international credentials, with over 100,000 of which are health-related. So states have passed legislation to modify requirements to licensure to accommodate for immigrants with work authorization and their foreign experience or credentials. They've also been working to employ pathways to licensure that better recognize these existing foreign trainings, or to provide more transparency with online guides about the licensing process. And then lastly on here, states have been working to fill gaps in English language proficiency with job-related English language classes and training, like the one on the screen. Next slide, yeah. So the second trend we've seen is with universal licensure recognition policies. These ULR policies are where a single state determines its unique process to grant a license by endorsement to a license holder from another state or territory. These laws sometimes have residency requirements, provisions for substantially similar requirements, and exemptions for compacts. And you can see a little chart on which states have which. I believe Arizona is the only state without, or Missouri is the only state without substantially similar requirement. And then, so next slide. So CSG published a report last December that includes a survey of licensing boards in 7 states. CSG collected 31 responses from licensing bodies in 7 states, 16 of which were from state boards in Pennsylvania. The questions assess staff member experiences with implementing ULR policy, the challenges they face, unintended consequences, and whether the policy has positively contributed to the state's workforce. Respondents were also asked to discuss the impact of the policy on the state's ability to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and any resulting workforce challenges. And when asked whether or not the universal recognition policy had positively contributed to their state's workforce, we had 35% of the respondents either agree or strongly agree that it positively contributed to their workforce. However, about 55 of the respondents were neutral. And you can find that report at licensing.csg.org if you're interested in learning more about it. So the third trend has been the enactment of interstate licensure compacts, which I'll go into a little bit of detail on, but you'll hear more about that later with some of the other agenda items, I believe. So interstate compacts are statutorily enacted agreements among states that allow licensees to practice across state lines. They can allow for practitioners to practice in multiple states, such as with telehealth, which can help alleviate practitioner shortages in high demand or rural areas. Currently, Nevada is a member of 2 interstate licensure compacts, the one for psychology and the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. I believe you'll hear some more about a few of these, but these are the rest of the active compacts for nursing, psychology, occupational therapy, medicine, EMS, counseling, physical therapy, audiology and speech pathology, and advanced practice nursing. Next slide. And here's just a quick map showing what states and how many compacts they are members of. So like I mentioned before, Nevada is a part of 2, It looks like Georgia is a member of the most compacts, with it being in about 8 total. And then there are some states like New York and California that haven't joined any so far. This table also shows some similarities and differences between universal recognition laws and interstate compacts. So while both methods require practitioners to abide by the scope of practice in the new jurisdiction, allow for expedited movement of practitioners during emergencies, and reduce barriers for out-of-state practitioners, universal license laws don't reduce barriers for in-state practitioners looking to practice in multiple states. They also don't gather a coalition of states to establish uniform licensure standards, and they don't create a multi-state database of licensure information to facilitate investigations, and a few other things on this chart. But next slide, please. But we will move on to another trend, which is how states are changing their regulatory structures. So states changing their regulatory structure stems from worries about active supervision with the North Carolina Dental Board case. And many centralized their licensing boards by grouping agencies and departments, delineating single lines of authority to the top, and administering the department by an individual instead of boards or commissions. Next slide. But to break it up into several models, states might have no central agency with only autonomous boards. They might have autonomous boards with a central agency, but only for administrative functions. The step up would be that the central agency could have slightly more functions, such as budgetary, personal, and some disciplinary activities, like in Model C. In Model D, a board's actions can be subject to review by the central agency. And lastly, in Model E, the central agency has complete authority and the boards are advisory only. Some changes might have a mix of these models depending on the professions. So here are some examples of states changing their regulatory structure. Michigan combines similar occupations under an umbrella board. Kentucky centralized all their licensing board under the Public Protection Cabinet. Mississippi created the Occupational Licensing Review Commission. Oklahoma centralized their licensing board under the Department of Labor. And for example, Colorado has the Division of Professions and Occupations to centralize their licensing boards. So the next trend in licensing reform has been in creating digital licensing systems to create a paperless licensure process. The pandemic heightened awareness of the need to provide licensing services online as offices switched to remote work. And around 26 states have at least partial online licensing systems, a couple even before the pandemic. Some features of these online licensing systems include online initial applications and renewal, digital licenses, online continuing education credits, and the ability to pay fees online. By digitizing the licensing processes, states can lower costs and processing times. They can lessen the need for physical office locations, and they can utilize the ability of the state databases to increase accountability. Next slide. So last but not least, states have been making efforts to expand apprenticeship programs across the US. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Apprenticeships are an earn while you learn program with on-the-job training for future practitioners of a trade or profession. According to the Department of Labor, 94% of those who complete an apprenticeship program maintain employment and earn an average salary of $70,000. There's been a 128% increase in new apprenticeships since 2009. and 12,000 new apprenticeships programs have been created in the last 5 years. These programs are available in over 1,000 occupations, including careers in high-growth industries such as healthcare, cybersecurity, information technology, and energy. So here are some examples of states expanding their apprenticeship programs. Iowa passed legislation to require licensing boards to grant licensure to those who complete an apprenticeship program that meets certain requirements. This bill in Idaho creates provisions for the recognition of apprenticeships for licensing purposes. And in Maine, the Maine Apprenticeship Program is very robust with apprenticeships available for nurses and medical assistants. So with that, we'll set aside the remaining time for any questions you may have. Just feel free to ask anything that came to mind during the presentation, and we'll answer them best we can.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was such a wonderful presentation. I was fortunate enough to see CSG present portions of it during the conference in the fall. And so I was really excited that you guys were able to present today to share it with the committee, because I think it's important to see the trends and what other states are doing. And I know I have a handful of questions, but before I ask my questions, I am going to turn and let the committee have the first opportunity to ask questions. So committee members, if you have questions, could you just please raise your hand so I can visibly see your hand up? Oh, I believe we have questions from Senator Spearman. So we will start with our Vice Chair. Vice Chair Spearman, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess the question I have, the information, thank you so much. Information was very informative. One of the questions that persists in my mind is, have we done anything, have there been any studies, and perhaps that'll be presented later, to look at the impact of licensure or lack thereof on military spouses? Since we have, especially in Southern Nevada with Nellis Air Force Base, and we also have Creech and a number of the other Air Force bases that are in some of the more rural parts. So when military members are stationed at a particular place, most of the time the cost of living demands that there is more than one income earner. So have we looked at anything related to how the licensure process impacts military spouses, particularly?
Yeah,
that's part one.
Yeah, and Vice Chair, I'm going to let Ms. Bison answer that, but just that you know too, we do
May.
The next agenda item. We do have Ms. Kelly May Douglas on, so I'm sure she can help answer some of those questions too with the Department of Defense, specifically presenting on barriers to employment faced by veterans, military members, and their spouses.
Right. And I was just going to say, and the reason for that, I know when we were in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, we dealt with that just a little bit, but I'm trying to make sure that we're doing an integration of what CSG is doing. NCSL is working on some of it, but sometimes the information is compartmented. And I think it's important for us as legislators to understand the total picture, because that's what impacts our military. And I'm real passionate about that. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Spearman. I can speak to that point a little bit. Certainly, I think Kelly May Douglas is the best equipped to handle that question, but there is a significant cost to licensure for military spouses. I know DOD sites, they move on average of every 1 to 2 years, and just imagine it takes you 6 to 9 months to receive a license in a new state. And then before you know it, you have to pack up and move again. So there is a significant cost. And a lot of times, I think Kelly May might have data to show this, but a lot of times military spouses just either drop out of the workforce completely or move to a non-licensed sector. So, doing something that's not in the field, which they have the training and experience. And so that's very unfortunate, and something that, at CSG, we're really working hard to try to alleviate through the passage of interstate compacts, which Caitlin mentioned. Currently there's 9 active interstate compacts, and we're working on 5 new ones for teaching, social work, cosmetology, dentistry, and massage therapy. But these interstate compacts all have provisions for military spouses that say, while your spouse is active duty, you can designate a home state. And if you're moving around the country to any other compact member state, you do not have to get a new license in that state. That state will recognize your home state license. And so it's seamless. There's no extra hoops, extra training, no extra exams. It's instantaneous that the spouse is granted authority to practice in the new state through the interstate compact that's in place. So DoD has kind of said that compacts are the gold standard for portability for their spouses. And so that's the primary issue that spouses face. Portability and interstate compacts are a great way to help alleviate those burdens.
And Madam Chair, if I could just say this, one of the things that I've pressed hard for the last 4 years that I was on the executive committee is to make sure that we have this information integrated. Because when it's compartmentalized, it's very easy for, especially at the state level, very easy for us to forget how the impact of non-compact states, how that impacts our service members. So I'm just for the record, I'm just trying to make sure that the information, as thorough as it is, to make sure that we're always integrating that with information that is there that Ms. Douglas will present as part of her presentation as the regional representative for DoD. So.
Any other questions, Vice Chair, before I turn it over to other members? Okay. Members, any other questions? Okay, I do have a couple, and I'll try to keep the list short. But since I have this opportunity, I want to make sure that the committee members get to hear all of the information as well. But in the presentation, you talked about some of the barriers to licensure, and we talked about how one of the barriers is for the population, low-income population. Is there any trend that you see with boards across the states where they offer like scholarships or grants to help cover the cost of the licensure to help get more people into that workforce?
Sorry, go ahead, Caitlin. I can chime in.
I was just going to say that I'm not sure completely about grants or scholarships. I know, like I mentioned, with military spouses, they sometimes waive the fees, especially with the pandemic. We saw a lot of waived fees with temporary provisions. And then I think the biggest push for helping with those fees, though, would be in terms of the apprenticeships, so they could continue to earn money while they fulfill those licensure requirements, would be like the most helpful thing that states are doing that I'm aware of. Matt, did I miss anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would add there is, the unfortunate situation is a lot of times these state boards live completely off of their licensure fees for their revenue. And so they're very hesitant to do anything around lowering fees, waiving fees, things like that, unless they have the explicit purpose to aid populations like military spouses. But just for their general licensing population, a lot of times those independent state boards are really reliant on those licensure fees for their revenue. It's really their only source of revenue. So that's something that's tough for boards to get behind, and not something that we've really seen a significant amount of.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Bryson, you touched a little bit on like the waiving of fees as a temporary provision as a result of COVID. I mean, are there any other like temporary provisions that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic that you think boards are looking to continue? Maybe that was a benefit?
There were some where, not taking they waived exam requirement, things like that. So that obviously would continue to be temporary. The only thing there's been some with some exam requirements rather than being in person, them continuing to be online. So things like that may continue to pop up and be more permanent. Could you think of anything, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, we saw some stuff around agreements between states, like temporary agreements to recognize each other's licensees, particularly in those professions that were in high demand during the pandemic: nursing, respiratory therapy. So some of those provisions, I think, especially around telehealth too, we saw, during the pandemic, the rise of telepractice significantly. And so I think that could be something that's lasting out of the pandemic, is a state's willingness to adopt telepractice as a viable means of practice, and doing that in a way that makes sense across state lines, so that you're not asking someone to go through the licensure process again when they're seeing someone through telephonic or electronic means.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schaefer. And then just my last question, and then I'm going to do a last call with the committee members. I see Vice Chair has another question, but you guys have that publication that you referenced in your presentation that examined or kind of studied the universal licensure. Do you guys have a similar publication that studies compacts, and maybe one that studies the regulatory structure? I'm curious to see how states responded, those states that do have like umbrella regulatory bodies, or have a different regulatory structure, how they responded to that, and if they saw benefit to their state.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a lot of resources on interstate compacts. The Council of State Governments, a policy program that we have at CSG, is our national center for interstate compacts. So we're really the only organization out there that's working on compacts. So there's plenty that we can provide the committee, plenty of educational resources about compacts. Regarding regulatory structure, we don't have anything specifically on that in terms of like a survey report or anything like that. I would point you to the Council on Licensure Enforcement and Regulation. It's an organization called CLEAR, and their members are regulatory bodies, and they do a lot in this space as well, helping states examine their regulatory framework and maybe make adjustments where needed. So they have a lot of educational resources around state regulatory structure. So I'd be happy to provide that to the committee after the meeting.
Thank you so much. And thank you. I just want to thank you, Mr. Schaefer and Spryce, for your presentation. Before I let you guys go, I do see another question from our Vice Chair. So I'm going to go back to her, and then we'll move on to our next agenda item. Vice Chair?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So just a real quick question. I know that one of the things that was presented to us about 6 years ago, I think, was the changing demographics here in Nevada, that we're a graying state. So the licensure compact, what effect, if any, would that have positively or negatively on the number of medical personnel who are retiring, specifically those who address needs in particular populations, such as the seasoned citizens, such as those rare diseases? We're standing up the committee to look at kidney disease and all those sorts of things. So is there anything related to the licensure in the compact agreements that would be able to help us in those areas? Number one, the people who are retiring, how do we make sure that we still have enough medical personnel for that? And number two, especially with those rare diseases that are occurring, especially in the pediatric population. And Madam Chair, I appreciate your indulgence, but I think that's all.
Great. Thank you for the question. Yes, I think certainly we've seen compacts fill shortage areas, particularly in healthcare. We can circulate the list again of all the active licensure compacts, but they're basically all in healthcare. So in terms of that aging population, the retirement population, those folks are going to need doctors and nurses and occupational therapists and physical therapists. And, there's a compact in all those professions that would allow for there to be those shortage areas, allow for mobility for workers. So practitioners from other states could come to Nevada and potentially fill those shortage areas. So we've certainly seen that as a big benefit of compacts in the healthcare space.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Okay, committee last call. Okay, well, I just want to thank you, Mr. Schaefer and Ms. Bison, again for joining us this morning and for all of the information you guys provided. I think it's just so important and to see where the trends are in occupational licensing. So thank you. I appreciate your participation this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Okay, committee, with that, we can move on to our next agenda item. I think we heard a little bit about it from our vice chair, but certain populations who frequently move across state lines may have difficulty obtaining professional license, such as veterans, military members, and their spouses, whose training inside the military may not align with state licensing requirements. The legislature has considered this issue in previous sessions. For example, in 2015, we passed AB 89. Among the various provisions of the bill, certain regulatory boards were required to issue a license by endorsement to qualified veterans, military members, and their spouses. Each session, we continue to remove barriers to occupational license, and this topic does deserve our attention. We have with us today Ms. Kelly Mae Douglas, the Pacific Southwest Regional Liaison and State Defense Liaison to the United States Department of Defense. She will provide a presentation on the barriers to employment faced by veterans, military members, and their spouses. Ms. Douglas, when you're ready, the floor is yours. You may begin. And thank you for joining us.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen, Chair?
Yes, we can, but it looks like you might need to, there you go, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chair Howdigi and members of the committee. I really appreciate you having me. For the record, my name is Kelly Mae Douglas. I work for the Department of Defense in the State Defense State Liaison Office. Our office is has been in place since 2004, and it was established by the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. We are charged to address designated personnel and readiness key issues with state policymakers to change laws and policies to improve military family well-being. We've helped enact over 1,000 bills over the last 16 years, and they've covered a wide range of issues, such as family law, K-12 education, voting, health policy, and of course, military spouse employment and occupational licensing. So as I mentioned, we work with policymakers and stakeholders throughout the states. We identify 10 issues each year that we focus on, and those issues are developed in collaboration with the service headquarters, the military services, communication with local commanders, military spouses, veterans, and we identify what policymakers can make at the, what changes policymakers can make at the state level that kind of cross over the whole nation. So it's something that we look at every year, and we prioritize what is most important to the military community at that moment. So if it's a priority for military families, that's what we work on. And so I do want to say, if you are interested in our other issues, you can look at our website, which is listed there. But as you can see in this visual here, the 2022 key issues, 3 of the top quality of life issues that we're working are all related to easing barriers to licensure for military spouses. And I'll talk about those 3 approaches that DoD is taking in the next slides. So I just wanted to provide just a snapshot experience of from the mouths of actual military spouses. I won't read it through, but one of the first quote here is a military spouse that works in the education system, and just details how much work is needed to go through each time that spouse moves, and the requirements, not just for the fees that we've talked about before, but also substantial amount of documentation that has to be collected before the application is even submitted. And then the second one is a quote from a speech and language pathologist who was actually living in Nevada at the time, that just is sharing, how challenging it really can be every single time a military spouse moves with their service member, and the delays in employment that they experience every single time. It's already been mentioned, and Matt Schaefer and Caitlin did a great job of kind of giving an overview of the military spouse experience, but military spouses do move across state lines 10 times more than their civilian counterpart. They are 34% of military spouses are in a licensed profession, which is typically about 10 to 15% higher than their civilian counterparts. And at the same time, they're moving. And so any sort of delay or barrier that they're experiencing is disproportionate for them, because we found that more military spouses are in those licensed professions. So just an interesting kind of perspective for you. Okay. So I think I need to go back just one second. I think I might have skipped forward too much. Oh, okay, nope, that was good. All right. So DOD has been focused on militaries, or on reducing barriers to licensure, not just for military spouses, but for service members, and separating service members who are joining the civilian population. But since 2011, we've really been focusing on military spouses pretty exclusively, just realizing what effect lack of career portability is having on our active duty force. We have done many studies, and one of the key findings of a recent study was that a big proportion of active duty service members have stated that their spouse's ability to maintain their career on their career path is, or their lack of ability to do so, is a #1 factor in whether they decide to stay in military service or not, which affects national security, because a lot of these military spouses that are in licensed professions are further along in their career path than, let's say, younger spouses. And so their military member spouse is regarded as very highly experienced. The DoD has put millions and millions of dollars of training into each individual service member that has risen in the ranks. And when you lose that type of experience, it has a direct effect on national security. So I only say that to explain why this is such a high priority for DoD. And I just want to kind of highlight some of the things that have happened recently that to kind of demonstrate how important this is to DoD. In February 2018, the 3 service secretaries sent a letter to the National Governors Association explaining that how important licensure, career portability and licensure portability is to all 3 services. In 2020, the Deputy SecDef sent a letter to each governor and to Governor Sisolak with a detailed individual report on where the state stood as far as DoD's perspective in terms of providing licensure portability for military spouses. And Nevada, as we've talked earlier in this hearing, there have been things that Nevada has done, and we did report that, but there's still a lot more that we can do to ensure that it's a friendly place for military spouses to continue their career at the level that they deserve. So most recently, in December 2020, the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, had a requirement for each of the services to develop criteria to evaluate each state's each state's laws in terms of how portable the military spouse licensure is in those states. And they're required to include those criteria in all basing decisions moving forward. So not just closing a base, but also where a major mission might be placed or removed now has to be military spouse licensure, portability, and reciprocity now have to be one of the quality of life measures that are included in those decisions. And this is just a snapshot here. The Air Force led the way as far as meeting that requirement. They have a website. They share this information with publicly for military spouses to understand where each state stands in terms of their level of support for licensure portability. And you can see it here. Nevada is it kind of in that yellow range, that mid-range, and that comports with the DoD criteria as well, which I'll talk about next. So, like I said, each service branch has to come up with their own criteria, or they can use the DoD criteria. It's a little bit different. The DoD criteria is more broad. It's really about progress and helping states to make incremental change rather than a snapshot evaluation. And it's not used for basing, but the military services can use our evaluation for their basing decisions. And as you can see here, our approach is a continuum of opportunities to transfer an occupational license between states for short, the continuum goes from the bottom to the top, short term to long term. And you can kind of see it also matches with the color red to green. So we use 3 lines of effort to meet each of these kind of points of the continuum. So at the very bottom there, a state with no portability is a state that just has no laws at all that allow for any sort of waiver or exemption or temporary license. There's just nothing there for portability. And then you move up into states that have some language in, but we've found the language to be either weak, as in using may instead of shall language, or being very vague about what is actually required of the boards to issue a license in an expedited fashion for military spouses. So Nevada does have, as you mentioned, Chair, AB 89. It's a good start. It focuses mainly on healthcare occupations. It provides a license by endorsement within 45 days. But there's still language about substantial equivalency, and there is a substantial amount of documentation that military spouses would have to provide at the point of application, which means, that upfront work that military spouses have to do is creating the delay before application. And so I just really wanted to make that point. Then we move to the immediate term where we have assessed that that state has implemented everything that they have. And if you go to each board's website, that it would be very accessible to military spouses. That's kind of our immediate term. And then at the near term, these are states that have policies providing expedited endorsement or temporary license, but with minimal paperwork up front. And then you go into the top kind of tier of the state law continuum, where a state has exempted all part or all of their requirements, as in Arizona and Utah, as was mentioned earlier today. And then our long-term approach is licensure compacts. We believe that this is really the gold standard, as Matt has mentioned. We do see interstate compacts as the gold standard for providing for long-term reciprocity and long-term career portability for military spouses. And so that's our end goal. That's really what we would like to see states do. But we appreciate all efforts on the continuum moving up. So just taking a little time here just to kind of get more specific on Nevada. These are the current demographics that we have, and we have 3,000, a little over 5,000, almost 5.5 thousand military spouses in the state. 3,300 of those are in the workforce, and a little over 1,800 of those are those that are licensed in Nevada that are military spouses. And then just a breakdown here, 19% of military spouses are in healthcare fields, and 10% are in education fields. So again, just looking at our gold standard here, interstate compacts, we really believe that this is the true definition of reciprocity, in that it's a mutual agreement among states and not just something that helps, let's say, a military spouse who's coming into Nevada but not leaving Nevada. So these are the current compacts, and they've already been mentioned today. These are the compacts that we are helping the states with. Nevada has passed the Psychology Compact, but as you can see, we have 7 other compacts that are existing, currently working in the states, hoping that Nevada will consider joining more of these compacts. As you can see in the little note here, 42 states have joined 142 compacts. And that's just over, just in the last 5-6 years. So really great progress, but obviously we're hoping to move this piece along in Nevada. These are the future compacts, and again, Matt already mentioned them, but I just wanted to point out again, as far as the DoD prioritization of licensure and specifically compacts, DoD entered into an agreement with the Council of State Governments to help fund the establishment of additional compacts. And these 5 compacts here that are already approved and funded will be coming in the next year or so. And that is as a result of that collaboration between DoD and CSG. I guess another point I just want to make in this is continual, and we really do see it as the wave of the future in terms of portability. The second tier of our approach that I mentioned, our continuum, again, is to enhance state law. We are asking states to look at what they currently do for military spouse portability and look at ways to streamline the process further. And so for Nevada, really looking to further streamline the endorsement that's already provided by reducing the amount of upfront paperwork and other documentation that's required, coursework and exams. Expanding the 1-year temporary license to additional occupations. And then expediting the adjudication of the license to move it from 45 days to 30 days. And then finally, to change all permissive language from may to shall. And then finally, like I mentioned, we also are looking at our near-term request for states is to consider improving accessibility to existing policies for military spouses. So this could include having additional information more specific to military spouses on the board's websites and on all applications, to provide professional development for staff to understand the military life, as well as how to help military spouses to navigate the system within your state. And then another idea is some states have done is they've designated a military spouse and veteran liaison within each board that is specifically, that person specifically there to help military spouses and the military community. And then I know that there's a requirement in Nevada for a report regarding veterans as far as with the boards, how many veterans have applied and various data points. And we've just asked that military spouses be added to that reporting requirement to the legislature. Just as far as the recent legislation, all of these bills did fail, but we did have, we were really excited that we had bills in play last year that addressed each of the components of our approach to licensure portability. So hoping that we can revive these efforts and really move forward, make progress here in Nevada. That's all I have for my information. I'm really happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I appreciate the time, Chair and Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Douglas. That was a great presentation, definitely very informative. I appreciate you being here and sharing that with us. Can I ask you for a favor? Would you exit out of your presentation? I want to make sure I can see all of the committee members. I know we're gonna have questions. I'm gonna go directly to our Vice Chair because I believe she'll have some questions for you. Vice Chair, do you have questions?
Yes, ma'am, and I'll try to make sure that they're condensed.
Nope.
I think everyone knows my passion about this, and it comes directly from my experience. The last 3 years of my military career was spent at the Pentagon in the Army Operations Center, where I saw both wars from a bird's eye view, and also worked with people who were paraplegics who were coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, many of whom were under the age of 30 and had lost their limbs. And it is for those reasons that I believe we have an obligation to make sure that those who make the sacrifices for our country, we have an obligation to make sure that not only their lives, but when we serve, our families serve as well. Our families are the ones that are up at night hoping that the phone doesn't ring at 2 o'clock. Our families are the ones that when the doorbell rings, they don't want to see the chaplain or a senior enlisted person standing there in Class A's getting ready to give them some bad news. And so this is, for me, this is personal. And I would just like to say this. Number one, many of the military spouses who cannot get work because we do not have compacts in place are women. And I believe we have to look at this from the standpoint of, yes, it's a military spouse, but it's also women, and we cannot claim to be concerned about the economic status of women unless we also put in place some things that help the economic status of women who are also military spouses. Number one, the 35% unemployment rate among military spouses. There are a number of articles and academic review, peer-reviewed journals that talk about how being a military spouse screws up your career. There are also that when we start talking about the issue, and Ms. Douglas mentioned that there's a whole issue of national security. When we have people who are language experts, when we have people who are fighter pilots, when we have people, especially we just stood up Space Force in Florida, we have people that we put millions of dollars of training into, and their spouse cannot find work, and then they leave the service. Then that means that we as taxpayers have not been judicious in terms of our stewardship for that type of training. The whole piece about retirement, we had SJR 6 last time that we're urging Congress to please establish some kind of federal retirement system for our spouses. Listen, the cost mitigation, I heard, CSG said, a lot of boards are reluctant because of the cost, and so what I say, balance that against the cost of someone losing their life, and balance that against the cost of someone losing a limb, and balance that against the cost of all the other sacrifices that our military members make because we love this country. And so $35, $50, or whatever the licensure costs, let's figure out a way to make that happen. This right here is very important. It's very important. And for me, and Madam Chair, I'm gonna stop because I'm getting real emotional now. For me, I hate it when people say thank you for your service and then they don't do anything just to tangibly say thank you for your service. And this is one of those instances where we can do something better and we can do more. And I believe that the people who are sacrificing already for us, they're being inconvenienced and they're uncomfortable. I think that we should at least make the extra step to help make sure that their lives are more comfortable. The cost of living in Southern Nevada is about $3,500 a year. And when you stop and you look at what an E4 and E2 and E1, a private PFC, a specialist and sergeant make, they barely make enough to come up to that $3,500. And most of them are on SNAP. And that is a sin and a shame before God Almighty.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Vice Chair, I am going to double check. Did you have a question for Ms. Douglas?
My question is, what can we do in the next legislative session? Yeah. What can we, because we got to do something. We've got to do something. For the last 6 sessions, we've been bringing bills to address this. And what can we do? What do we need to do? Is there anything we can do to prioritize and make sure that bills like Senate Bill 402 get passed? And I'm sorry, this is just real
No
close to
worries.
my heart.
Yeah, no worries, Vice Chair. Well, I look forward, we do get the opportunity to introduce BDRs as a committee for the committee next legislative session. So I'm hopeful that, we'll work together, you, me, and Ms. Douglas on some BDRs to help move the needle on this. I am going to go to Senator Lang next. I saw she raised her hand, and then we will go to Assemblywoman Hardy.
Great, thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I found it very enlightening. I just have a couple questions. I'm really interested in the compacts, and if I were to do some research and look at probably 3 states that are on the forefront of creating compacts in their states with other states, what would those states be?
Thank you for the question, Senator Lang. So I'd have to get back to you. I don't want to misspeak. I know that there are a handful of states that have passed almost every single compact. Utah was leading the way in terms of compacts, but I believe Texas is one that I can think of, in Florida. I'll have to look in, but I'd like to get back to you with better data. We have it on our website, but I just don't have it right off the top of my head.
Great. If you do that, that would be really terrific, because I'd like to do a little bit of research.
Sure.
We can also have, Senator, that's a great question. I'm wondering if we could have our policy analyst, Ms. Kozlov-Thomas, if she could maybe reach out to CSG2 to see if they have any recommendations on 3 states leading in compacts, and then share it with the committee. So thank you, Senator. That was a great question.
That would be great. And then my next question is, so I was caught up in this. I have a K-12 certificate for teaching that I can teach any subject, and it's supposed to be able to be used in every state. Although when I came to Nevada, they didn't want to accept that. So I see that education is on your list. And when I look at that list of professions that you're looking at getting compacts for, they're all professions that we're having trouble getting people in the workforce to fill those positions, and that they are, we're just short on those specialties. So I think that I'm really interested in, as Senator Spearman is, in the military spouses, and making sure that we can get military spouses into those positions that we have a void in our state sooner. And you mentioned that reducing the period to 30 days, is that correct?
Yes.
And in the compacts that have been negotiated, are most people doing the 30 days, or does some do less?
So the 30 days that we, thank you, Senator Lang. The 30 days that we have that we've listed is for that mid-range policy enhancement that we're asking for. Compacts are even better than 30 days. It doesn't take any time at all. It's immediate.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for those great questions. I am going to go to Assemblymember Hardy next.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this presentation. There was just so much information, great information, that I think we as legislators and policymakers need to be aware of, because this is really an important area. As Senator Lang, Senator Spearman, eloquently said, we have a shortage in so many of these key areas, and I have no doubt there are very qualified, educated spouses that could fill these positions, and we should do whatever we can and follow what other states have done. It's obviously working. They figured it out. And so we can do that here in Nevada. One thing I was kind of surprised to see was there were 7 bills in 2021 that addressed those key areas that you're trying to target, and all of those failed. So have we, now I don't know off the top of my head what all those were, of course, but is there any way some of those possibly could be worked on and sorted out, things that were wrong with them, why they didn't pass, and revisit those in 2023, if you have that answer?
Thank you, Senator. The only thing that I really could identify as one of our hurdles, and it's a big hurdle, and it's not just in Nevada, it's everywhere, is that there's a disconnect with many of the labor unions and workers associations between the actual employees and the laborers who actually do support these types of initiatives, and the perception, I think, and maybe some misconceptions about how these interstate agreements work. I just think that that's probably where the biggest hurdle is.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And at least, if we're able to identify some of the issues, we can maybe work with those groups and work those out before we get to session to try and answer their concerns, or see where, again, we can implement these important policies. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Douglas, I do have one question, just one question. The 5 compacts that you said you were going to be focusing on with CSG, are those compacts already in existence or created, or will you and CSG be creating those compacts because they're areas of need?
Matt probably could answer that question, Senator, a little bit better than me, but they are established and they are being developed as not, so they haven't been rolled out for states to join yet. So Matt might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're really looking at probably sometime late fall this year or winter.
Okay, perfect. And I believe we've lost our CSG presenters, but we will touch them. But you answered my question. So the compacts haven't been rolled out yet. They're new compacts that are going to be rolled out because they're areas of need. Okay.
Yeah, the Chair, each of those national boards or associations are working through all the details of what the compact will actually entail for each of them, specific to their occupation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Douglas. And then I trust that you and our vice chair will work together on some bills, and I hope that we can sponsor some committee bills here from this joint interim committee to help alleviate some of those barriers for not just our active military members, but veterans and their spouses as well. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think it was a wealth of information and obviously an area that I think we need to improve and focus on. I do see a hand raised, so I'm going to come back to Senator Lang. Senator Lang, did you have a comment or a question before we move on to our next agenda item?
Sure, thanks. I just have one more question.
Absolutely.
So I'm in the process of creating the compacts. You said they're talking to the national boards. So do the people at the national boards then talk to our state boards, or how does that process work?
Absolutely, Senator. So just kind of, I think we even have some people on our screen that I've seen that I'm familiar with. So the typically, in order to move forward in the state board really needs to take the leadership role and have buy-in and want to have that compact in the state. If we don't have the buy-in of the state boards, we're not going anywhere in the state. So that's been a huge asset with the compacts that we've worked so far in Nevada, the physical therapy compact, the nurse licensure compact. We had that buy-in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you again so much, Ms. Douglas. I really appreciate you being here with us and for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair.
Working very closely together throughout this interim and next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, members. Absolutely. Okay, members, we are now going to move on to our next agenda item number 5, which is a presentation on the Sunset Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission and review of survey of certain regulatory bodies during the 2019-2020 interim. Many familiar faces because many of us also sit on the interim Sunset Subcommittee. So you guys are all familiar, but for those who are tuning in over the internet, the Sunset Subcommittee was established in 2011 to review the over 200 of Nevada's boards and commissions and similar entities to determine the need of the boards and to make make recommendations on whether they need to be modified, consolidated, or terminated, or continued. With us to present, we have Mr. Cesar Malgarejo with the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. He serves as our policy analyst for the Sunset Subcommittee, this interim. Mr. Malgarejo, when you are ready, you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Cesar Malgarejo. I am a Senior Policy Analyst with the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. And I would just like to make a note that as nonpartisan staff of the Legislative Council Bureau, we can neither advocate nor oppose for any of the topics discussed today. As you mentioned this morning, I will provide a summary of the Sunset Subcommittee, which a lot of you are members of. So some of this information might sound a little bit repetitive from our meeting last week. And I'll also be kind of summarizing the Sunset Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission's special survey of certain regulatory bodies from the 2019-2020 interim. This report from 2019-2020 interim has been uploaded to the meeting page, and it is accessible to the members of this committee as well as members of the public. And just by way of background, in 2008, former Governor Jim Givens established the Nevada Spending and Government Efficiency Commission during the declining economy. In this commission's final report, recommendation number 17 created a Sunset Commission to review government operations for the purpose of improving efficiency. As the chair stated, the Sunset Subcommittee was formally established in 2019 with passage of Senate Bill 251 with bipartisan support. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, there's roughly 37 states that have passed similar form of sunset review. The Sunset Subcommittee is composed of 6 legislative members that are appointed by legislative leadership, as well as 3 additional non-voting members that are nominated by the governor and appointed by the chair of the Legislative Commission. The duties of the Sunset Subcommittee are codified in NRS 232B, which regulates legislative review of public agencies. The subcommittee is responsible for review of all boards and commissions in Nevada created by the legislature, which there are approximately 230, and the subcommittee is also required to recommend to the Legislative Commission whether each board that has been reviewed should be continued, modified, consolidated with another entity, or terminated. Only those boards and commissions established by the Nevada Constitution and those established by executive order are outside the purview of the Sunset Subcommittee. Subcommittee is required to conduct a review of each professional or occupational licensing board and regulatory body in this state to determine whether the restrictions on the criminal history of an applicant for an occupation or professional license are appropriate. This new duty was enacted in 2019, and it kind of relates to the measures that CSG commented on about removing burdens for licensing. In 5 interims, Sunset has reviewed an average of nearly 27 boards and commissions each interim, yet statute only requires Sunset to review a minimum of 10 each interim. Of the nearly 126 boards and commissions that have been reviewed, several have been reviewed twice, primarily the occupational and professional licensing boards. 20 boards and commissions and similar entities have been repealed at the recommendation of the Sunset Subcommittee. However, to put this in perspective, the 2019 legislature created 23 new boards and commissions, and the 2021 legislature created 7 new entities. Since the creation of the Sunset, the Sunset is about halfway through its review of the statutory boards and commissions. Some of these boards were created back in the 1800s and may not have been reviewed by the legislature in a long time. The subcommittee provides an opportunity for the legislature to look into their operations. It also offers the boards and commissions an opportunity to come before the legislative committee and make requests for revisions to statutes that might make their operations more efficient. And just a final note on the Sunset Subcommittee is the NRS provides that it is the burden of board or commission to prove that there is a public need for its continued existence. I'll move on to the special report that was uploaded to the committee's page. So this report that you see consolidates the responses collected from each independent professional and occupational licensing board, commission, or entity pursuant to Title 54 of the Nevada Revised Statutes, which in this report they're referred to as a regulatory body. So this report was initiated when the legislature passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 6 in the 2019 session, directing the subcommittee to conduct an interim study concerning the operations of regulatory bodies that regulate occupations or professions pursuant to Title 54. Over the past several interims, the Sunset Subcommittee has reviewed all of these boards. Because it reported concerns about the way that some of the boards manage their business affairs, the subcommittee was directed to dig a little bit deeper into those operations and practices during the 2019-2020 interim. By way of background, Title 54, which regulates professions, occupations, and businesses of the NRS, contains provisions governing more than 55 professions and occupations and businesses. These independent regulatory bodies regulate 33 categories of occupations, while the remainder are administered through state agencies or officials, or rely on local officials or civil action for enforcement. This report in front of you contains a table of 33 independent regulatory bodies. The survey responses provided from each of the regulatory bodies are hyperlinked in the body's name in this table, which includes an attachment it includes any attachments the body may have submitted to the response. So on page 1, you will find the table with the regulatory body's names and the links to their reports. This survey was emailed to each of the 33 independent bodies. 31 regulatory bodies responded to the survey. The 2 bodies that did not respond include the Board of Homeopathic Medical Examiners. The reason they didn't respond is because at the time and still today, there has been several vacancies for the membership of this board, and this board has not been in full operation for the last couple of years. And then the other board that did not reply was the Nevada State Board of Optometry. The survey and the report consists of 4 sections. So section 1 is the required information pursuant to SCR 6, which asks questions about the makeup of finances and operations of a regulatory body. These specific questions are laid out in the resolution. And so in the report, we try to group responses and we try to provide a summary of all the responses that we received under each of the questions. Section 2 of the report is required information pursuant to NRS 232B and 622.081. Under section 622.081 of the 85 of the Nevada Revised Statutes requires a certain regulatory bodies to develop a process for applicants to petition for a review of whether their criminal history would disqualify them from licensure. Again, this is passage of AB 319 in the 2019 session, which attempted to remove some of the barriers for licensure for those with criminal history. And NRS 232B.237 requires the Sunset Subcommittee to conduct a review of the professional and occupational licensing boards to determine whether the restrictions on the criminal history of an applicant for an occupation or professional license are appropriate. Section 3 of the report is additional information regarding licensure by endorsement and reciprocal licensure, identifying which bodies practice licensure by endorsement and the reciprocity, how many individuals have been licensed in the past 5 years through these means, and how the various bodies implement these initiatives. As you've heard in the previous presentations, the Nevada Legislature has been pretty active in attempting to remove barriers for licensing for specific individuals, but they've also passed several measures increasing opportunities for boards to, or for applicants to be licensed by endorsement and the reciprocity. Section 4 of this report is again additional information regarding licensing practice of military spouses, identifying efforts by regulatory bodies to support the expedited licensure of military spouses relocating to the state. Again, sections 3 and 4 were included at the request of the members of the subcommittee because they wanted to address the licensing practices within the last 5 years. Again, there's been several measures by the legislature that have been enacted to try to increase licensing practices. And I believe this is the first time that we've really studied those measures and try to get information on their impact. Just because of the conversation that we previously had, I just want to highlight some of the responses on section 4 concerning military spouses. So of the 33 regulatory bodies surveyed, 13 report that they do not track military spouse applicant information specifically. As Kelly Mae Douglas stated, there's no specific statute that requires the boards to separately identify military spouse applicants. We do have statutes that requires the boards to track military and veteran applicants for licensure. So the majority of these boards, this type of information is consolidated, and the military spouses cannot be extrapolated. On page 26 of the report, we have a table 14, which breaks down the number and status of applications received from military spouses and provides the average processing time for these applications. From the 10 regulatory bodies that provided information, number of applications received from military spouses within the last 5 years range from 1 to 1,500, and the average processing time ranged from 1 to 60 days. Additionally, in the report, we've on the very last page, we've consolidated responses from the boards as to those that provide waiver of fees for military spouses. So 15 of the 3 regulatory bodies did indicate they do not waive application fees for military spouses. Most of the boards that do waive the fees for military spouses, these boards, it's directed in statute under their individual chapters to provide a waiver of application fees. So the waiver of application fees in statute is not a blanket across all boards. They're only under individual chapters. Madam Chair, that's my brief summary of the report, but I'm happy to kind of dive into some of these sections a little further. Are there any specific questions?
Before I turn it over to the members, I do have a quick question, Mr. Maligarejo. I'm looking at table 14, the applications, and for the under the medical portion of the board, it shows that 3 applications were received, but that 5 applications were approved. Do you know, did they have any explanation for that? Have they approved more applications and applications that were received? Just out of curiosity. The Board of
Madam Chair, says I'm going to for the record, I believe that is the 5-day application. I believe it's average days from receipt up to approval.
Well, I think
however, I can go back to some of the notes from this report and try to get a better answer for you.
I was just curious if maybe those were like maybe applications from a previous year, maybe that were approved this year, or possibly 3 applications approved for an average of 31 days.
Right. Madam Chair, I have to go back to our notes when we consolidate this report and just double check on that information.
Okay, and now I'll turn it over to members. Members, do you have any questions? I do see Senator Lang's hand up. So Senator Lang.
Here I am again. So Mr. Mejero, On the response that you received, you noted that there were two people, the optometry and the homeopathic, that you didn't receive responses for. Do you have a mechanism to be able to get responses from them? Are they required to respond? What's the process? Because I feel like this is kind of our checks and balances a bit about what's going on. And if they're not responding, that is concerning to me. And the second thing that's concerning to me is you mentioned that the homeopathic, they don't even have enough people to fill their subcommittee, or their committee. So does that give us pause, and does that give us a reason to maybe put them with somebody else that would be more responsive? I remember some bills in the legislature last session about homeopathic medicine, and it really gives me pause. Number one, that they aren't filling out the required reporting, and number two, that they can't fill their committee.
Yes, underlying for the record says I'm a community policy analyst. So two things on the responses. So we knew homeopathic wasn't going to be able to respond because of their situation, but the optometry, we've reached out several times and we just did not receive a response. And I mean, there really is no mechanism, I guess, to really enforce the response. I mean, they either provide it or they don't at this moment. And with the homeopathic situation, so I don't have all of the details at this time. However, the situation with the homeopathic board actually goes back to the 2018, the 2017-2018 interim. The Sunset Subcommittee did a review of the homeopathic board and found several discrepancies with just their operations, and they submitted legislation in the 2019 session to. So I'm looking up my notes at the moment. They submitted legislation to
I believe remove the board members and replace them.
Exactly. Thank you, Madam Chair. And then so there was no new board members that were replaced after they were removed during the 2019-2020 interim. And then there was further legislation that the Sunset Subcommittee discussed that would terminate the board and transfer the responsibility for regulating the practice of homeopathic medicine to the State Board of Health. However, there was no action taken in the 2021 session. We have been in contact, as staff of the Sunset Subcommittee, we have been in contact with the governor's office, and about half of the members have been appointed. They have had their first meeting since some time. They had their first meeting in December where they voted on some new leadership positions. They are working with the Attorney General's office to consolidate some reports and some old debts that they have. And actually, we are as staff at the Sunset Subcommittee, we are working with the Homeopathic Board to provide a presentation on their progress, hopefully at the March meeting.
Okay, thank you. And so, Madam Chair, I think that's something we should put on our watch list, because it seems like it's been going on for a while. And I do remember having some conversation about them creating a new board and getting some of those positions filled. But I just think that's something that we need to watch. May I ask one more question?
Absolutely, Senator, and it's something that we've been following too in the Sunset Subcommittee. And I know you asked about enforcement, but that's actually one of the things we look at, in the Sunset Subcommittee when we select boards to review. And because the previous two interims on them coming back to review and give us an update. And in future interim committees, Sunset Subcommittees, they can pull them again and always make the recommendations to the Leg Commission if they are not abiding, like following their reports or sending in their reports when staff requests them, that we do recommend that maybe they be consolidated or terminated. And so that is, I think we can't forget that we do have that mechanism as an enforcement tool to use as well.
Great.
Yes, Senator, you had a follow-up question, please.
Yeah, I just, I know that it was mentioned in the report that it takes 1 to 60 days to process military spouse applications. And I think our committee should look at ways that we can reduce that. 60 days is a long time. And so, and I think we heard in the last presentation, in some states, they take no days, right? And they just make it happen. So I think that's, and going with what comments that Senator Spearman made earlier, I think that that's something that we should definitely look at.
Thank you, Senator. And I do want to note, if you look at the table 14, that it wasn't all boards, it was only the osteopathic board. And I just want to do this because there's some boards that do a great job, right, of approving applications for military spouses. Like the accountants board has a 1-day average of approving it. The cosmetology board has 1 to 7 days average. So most boards are very expedited. And so I want to give credit to those boards who do have an expedited process in approving military spouses. And it looks like there was just that one board that took over 30 days to approve, that average days to approve. And so I just want to make sure that the other boards are getting credit for the work that they are doing as well.
Absolutely.
But I agree with you. I think it's definitely something that we, and now Vice Chair Spearman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, in conjunction with something that we experienced last time, and our roles were switched, and as a vice chair, you know the difficulty we had in trying to get that information from the boards 2 or 3 times. We sent the information out to get disaggregated. What does it look like in terms of spouses, veterans, and that sort of thing coming in? So in 402, one of the bills that didn't get across the finish line last session, there was a clause in there that would allow the governor, if they did not submit that information, to freeze their funds. And so to your question, Senator Lang, I think the teeth have got to be, there has to be a price to pay if they're not doing the things that the legislature ask them to do. And even, repeated requests to get the information for many of the boards was ignored. So until there's some teeth put in place, it's unfortunate that they don't see the need to make sure that we're doing what we said we're going to do for veterans and for military spouses. But that information will continue to be cloaked in an aggregated fashion. And what has to happen, we've got to have legislation that requires the disaggregation of that information. Otherwise, we will never have it. And as I said before, the sad part about it is people ought to know how important it is for us to show our dedication to the service of our military members and their spouses. So the last thing that I'll say too is, as we look at possible legislation for next session, I think it's going to be important to know that when BDRs go out, and then fiscal says, let's find out what the fiscal notes are. Please keep in mind that the fiscal notes that are attached are those that are attached by the boards, and that's their assessment of how much it will cost, not what it will cost the state in terms of the government. And that was a mistake that I made last time in terms of looking at the fiscal notes that the board send in, which is absolutely separate from what the general budget would be. And so I'm just saying, when you get the fiscal notes to come back, they come back, and that's the regulatory bodies saying this is how much it will cost them. It has absolutely nothing to do with what the general budget would be. And that's how many of the bills wind up getting stopped or stalled, because you look at the fiscal note and think, oh, this has an impact on the general budget. What they send back as a fiscal note is their assessment. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the general budget. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And members, any other questions? Okay, well, before we move on, I do want to thank you, Vice Chair, because this is an area that you've worked so hard on, and I know you're going to continue to work hard on it. It's an issue, and I know that I can trust in you as a Vice Chair, help BDRs for this interim committee coming into the next legislative session. And I do, again, want to thank you for your work in this area, and thank you and Mr. Malgarejo for your service to our country, both of you. So thank you. Okay, committee, our next agenda item is agenda item 6, which is a presentation from 5 boards that we have selected that frequently come before our standing commerce and labor committees. The boards are going to present on their best practices, operations, recent legislation, and how they have operated during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, the legislature creates occupational and professional licensing boards and sets the public policy governing them. Most of the laws regulating occupations and professions in Nevada are located in Title 54 of the Nevada Revised Statutes. These regulatory bodies are mandated to enforce the provisions of state law for the protection and benefit of the public. The boards are also invested with the authority to adopt regulations regarding the licensing and practice of the various professions, subject to review by the legislature. Again, we have selected 5 boards that will present today. We will start with our first board, which is the Board of Cosmetology, and we have Executive Director Gary Landry here to present. Mr. Landry, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Chair Howdy. I will share my screen and start my presentation.
When you are ready, the floor is yours, Mr. Landry.
Good morning, Chair Howdy, members of the Commerce and Labor Committee, and staff members. My name is Gary Landry, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology. I will be presenting the work accomplished by the entire Board of Cosmetology staff during my tenure, starting in 2013. Without the entire team working together, we could not have accomplished much of what I'm presenting today. Today, we are presenting the board's operational procedures and best practices before and during Governor Sisolak's emergency declaration in response to COVID-19. The slides that follow will include our mission statement, an overview of the board and board staff, the number of licensees and those we are licensing from the armed forces, a review of the number of licensees and their economic impact, a summary of the service we provide, the team approach that we take, a timeline of accomplishments we've achieved since 2013, the time savings we have put into place, the risks found in the beauty services, risk charts where we will include the risk document findings in other areas of the beauty industry, what happened in the legislature in 2021, and what to expect in 2023. And finally, what impact did we face under Governor Sisolak's emergency orders, and what did we overcome? Hope you find the presentation informative and enjoyable. The Nevada State Board of Cosmetology's mission is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of those who obtain cosmetology-related services. We deliver testing, licensing, and inspection services to beauty service industry stakeholders for the purpose of consumer protection. Since 2017, over 70% of the more than 33,000 cited violations from our inspections were the result of failed infection prevention and safety standards by a licensed beauty service industry participant or a salon facility. Our services are delivered in English, Mandarin, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We're a diverse agency of 16 members that operates in a team-based processing manner with an evolving modernized operation. You will note our ethnicity and gender charts that highlight our board's desire to be reflective of our licensees. We've made some changes to our organization with the inclusion of an executive team composed of an executive director, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, and a chief compliance officer. Our executive team has staff with multiple degrees. We have staff that are military veterans. We have staff that are bilingual in English, coupled with Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. We also have many of our staff who are licensees so they can relate to those they are servicing. Modernizing our operations and our current structural flexibility has helped us deliver better testing and licensing services to more than 37,000 beauty professionals. The modernization has helped us deliver better quality inspections on behalf of the consumers we protect. It has helped us develop educational and informational content to better communicate infection prevention and safety best practices. Modernization includes online services for testing, licensing, and inspection, converting our operations to a paperless office with online access to all of our information and other time-saving operations. We perform more than 7,000 health and safety inspections, conduct more than 500 consumer complaint inspections, and deliver more than 400 salon opening inspections annually to an industry with more than 37,000 licensed participants. Nearly 1,500 of the licensed professionals indicated military experience on applications. You can see in the military chart that we have a large number of licensees from active duty personnel and veterans in the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, along with other groups in the armed forces. This is accomplished by providing licensing in an easy to fill out online form and expedited procedures to license all persons who wish to be licensed. Our fees are very reasonable. We charge $35 a year to get a license. We've not found anyone who finds the fees unreasonable, as we provide great service. We provide it fast and efficiently. Since our fees are reasonable and our services are world-class in operations, we have not had to adjust our fees for COVID, the military, or veterans. We do have an apprenticeship program for those who live more than 60 miles from a cosmetology school. We serve more than 37,000 licensed or registered beauty service professionals that generate more than $500 million in sales in salons with employee-employer relationships or salons with commission employees. We do not have data on the estimated 40 to 60% of licensed beauty service professionals that are independent contractors. If independent contractors data is included, we predict that the beauty service industry generates over $1 billion in sales in Nevada annually. We're steadfast in our mission to protect the health, safety, and welfare of consumers that likely spend over $1 billion a year for their hair, nail, and skin care services in the state of Nevada. Back in 2013, before planning and designing the structure of our current operations, we went to the licensees that were experiencing our services to learn where we needed to improve. We listened to the students who waited more than 6 weeks to test and get their licenses after graduating school. We listened to salon owners who waited more than a month to open their business. We listened to the new Nevada residents who waited 3 weeks to transfer to Nevada. Through attentive listening, we learned the obstacles from those that experienced them firsthand. We did this before we started planning the operational structure in place today. We believe we have removed nearly all unnecessary operational barriers. The board's operations deliver 3 core services that focus on consumer protection. Those services are testing, licensing, and inspection services. The board's testing services validates the applicant's knowledge in infection prevention, best practices, and safe delivery of services with basic skills competency. We also provide a law test that allows us to know that the licensee understands the laws that affect cosmetology. The board's licensing services promote consumer confidence that the beauty service should be clean, safe, and perform with some level of competency and skill. The board's inspection services inspect industry participants for compliance with the health and safety regulations established by the Nevada State Legislature. We go out and inspect all salons an average of 2 times a year, and we inspect and investigate salons that have received complaints on. Any subject that is discussed between the teams has only 2 outcomes. 1, we need to do a better job communicating the information via the communication channels, or 2, we need to take the matter before the board for a review or decision. This operating structure has helped us with efficiency, diverse points of view, transparency, and the speed of our services. It has also helped to improve our ability to learn about industry innovation faster and respond with consumer protection information when needed. The teams are composed of a variety of individuals who are selected each year to allow cross-training on each team so that we are never without a backup in any group. The current board administration did not inherit this operating structure. We started planning it in 2013. We established improvement themes each year to help us piece together the structure that we have today. In 2015, we focused on improving the processing times of the entry point into the licensed beauty service industry by improving our testing and licensing services. In 2016, we focused on our consumer protection measures through improving our inspection services so they were consistent throughout the state and focus on NRS NAC regulations that protect the health and safety of consumers. We also made software and technological improvements which are mission critical to the speed and efficiency of our services. In 2017, we organized our internal operating structure to match the technological improvements that were made, and we established online applications and other online services. In 2018, we developed operating procedure guides to match the efficient processes that were developed through technology, and we laid the foundation to our education services by starting the Nevada Risk Project. In 2019, we improved our education services through information content development and community outreach events, and we strengthened our internal operations structure with skill sets that match the positions. In 2020, we built upon our existing knowledge base to make Nevada State Board of Cosmetology the national leader in consumer protection for beauty services. In 2021, we continue to operate in an efficient and effective manner, providing services to the licensees and protecting the consumers of beauty services. The licensing and testing services are more focused on servicing the licensed beauty professionals. It is important that we deliver fast and efficient services so they can get to work. The results of our accomplishments can be clearly measured when we compare 2013 to 2021 processing times for core application services. We reduced the processing time for testing from initial licensing from 48 days to 5 days. This time efficiency has eliminated the concern of lost wages for each new market participant by more than $1,500. We reduced the processing time for reciprocity, which is the ability to transfer a license from another state to Nevada, from 21 days to 1 day. This time efficiency has eliminated the concern of lost wages for experienced market participants entering a new jurisdiction by more than $2,100 per individual. We reduced the processing time for renewing a license from 14 days to 2 days. We reduced the processing time for verifying licensing information with other states from 21 days to 1 day. We reduced the processing time for opening a new salon from 30 days to 3 days. With this reduction in processing time, we've increased revenue by more than $10,000 per new salon. I'll do a few slides on the Nevada Risk Project. The idea for this report originated from the legislative mandate that passed in Senate Bill 69 in 2017. That bill made reference to services that were performed by licensed occupations and the necessity to be able to identify areas that the service could adversely affect public health. We started the Risk Project in February 2018, and is currently a 65-page report that identifies areas of risk in 21 beauty services. This report is a living document that we expect to continue to grow. The project started with multiple industry stakeholders licensed in Nevada, and the project grew to include multiple stakeholders licensed in 16 state jurisdictions. It included a multi-state agency collaboration with California, Maryland, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Wyoming. We all worked together to build the Nevada Risk Report. In total, the project included over 40 collaborators with more than 500 years of licensed cosmetology experience in 16 states. The project identifies risk in 21 beauty services and puts them into 3 risk types. Infection risk relates only to tools that can cut, puncture, or extract bodily fluid intentionally or unintentionally. A malpractice safety risk relates to the practical or theoretical malpractice. The misuse of a product or implement would be considered a malpractice safety risk. A product reaction risk is based on the consumer's irritation, allergic reaction, or the product's counter-reaction with the consumer's prescription medication. The risk percentage indicator is designed to communicate the number of steps within a service which, if improperly performed, could adversely impact the consumer. The project findings result in the development of beauty service info sheets that communicate the areas of risk, the types of risks, list of service steps, the tools and implements, and the products used for each service. The information collected could be used at a national level for consumer awareness information. It can provide legislative information for any cosmetology board to use in crafting bills. It can be used to develop educational content and curriculum development. It can form the foundation for improved sanitation inspection processes. It can be used for developing theory and examination content development. There's an unlimited amount of areas that it can be used in. Let's talk about legislation. We worked with the LCB to streamline NRS Chapter 644A so that various license type requirements were all in one section. This did not require legislation, but it made the statutes more accessible for the public and licensees. We'll now discuss legislation and what came out of the 81st legislative session held in 2021 and what we can expect going forward. In 2021, we received approval of an advanced esthetician license through Senate Bill 291, authored by Senator Roberta Lang. This license covered both the basics of esthetician work and the advanced medical procedures that estheticians needed to be trained for if they wish to practice in a medical spa under the guidance of a medical professional. We currently have a law review committee who convenes an open meeting for stakeholders. Currently, this group has not identified any need for changes to NRS 644A. The group is ready to implement any change the legislative body deems necessary, and we invite any of you or your legislative friends to work with the committee if you're interested in so doing. We'll now discuss what we had to do when Governor Sisolak put in the emergency orders to help guide us through the COVID-19 pandemic. We continued to work from home with our entire board staff as we had already developed operational procedures for every position and job classification. The immediate items that we had to face included the closure of all of the salons and schools of cosmetology. We implemented emergency measures for salon operations and developed videos that taught our licensees how to handle customers during the pandemic. We developed guidelines and extended our phone hours on the days that the governor was speaking in order to answer any questions from our licensees and the public. And finally, when cosmetology schools were allowed to reopen, we allowed distance learning to be used to allow students to learn from their homes over the internet. We still continue to allow distance learning at all schools until the emergency orders are lifted. We also had several areas that were not adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We continued testing, issuing, and renewing licenses. We brought our inspectors up to speed on how to conduct inspections safely during the pandemic. We split up our board staff into 2 working groups, with one group working in the office Monday, Tuesday, and the other group working from the office Wednesday, Thursday. The days that you did not work in the office, we provided for staff to work from home. We continue to work with a split staff even today. On behalf of the staff of the Board of Cosmetology, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to communicate how we serve the licensees, the public, and achieve our mission of consumer protection. We hope that we have adequately communicated our history, best practices, and operations to demonstrate our transparency and our participation in practice to promote a more open government. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. I can answer any questions that you may have of our organization.
Thank you so much, Mr. Landry. I always appreciate your presentations, and thank you so much for being a model board as well. Having sat on the interim sunset subcommittee and having to review boards, you guys were just great to work with and getting your information in and your presentation. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the committee before I have one question, but before I ask mine, I'm going to turn it over to the members to see if there's any questions from our Commerce and Labor members, committee members. Members, any questions for Executive Director Lang? Vice Chair Spearman, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say, Ms. Landry, I really appreciated working with you all, and I consider you all among some of the most progressive boards, regulatory boards that we have. I'm impressed by the way that you've been able to disaggregate the information regarding veterans and military veterans and spouses, et cetera. Here's the question that I have. Last year, I think we dealt, I want to say it was maybe about September, October, we dealt with an issue of an establishment making some claims about a duty procedure that were not necessarily true, and that also raised the issue about how people were either filing paperwork where with regard to the address of the owner, et cetera. Have we been able to tighten that up at all? And it was in the area of estheticians.
Yes, we've tightened that up, and we've got a lot more focus on that group. We have an advanced esthetician degree and advanced esthetician license that's going to provide us with more opportunity to get into aesthetics groups. But we did investigate that and tighten that up. I can get specific information on it for you from our staff, and we'll send it to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I don't know if this comes under your purview or not, but the other thing that we discovered during that time was who's handling tattoo parlors and people who are doing some peripheral work adjacent to the tattoo industry.
We don't handle the tattoo industry, and we don't do anything with tattoos. That's outside of our purview.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that was one of the questions. Is there anyone who is responsible for making sure that that industry is following best practices and consumer protection?
I believe the health department is the one who licenses the tattoo artist, but I'm not sure who regulates them on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and that was something we can talk about it offline, but that was the I think that was the loophole that allowed some of them to be doing some of the more unscrupulous things that we discovered. The last thing I was going to ask is there are some veterans who want to use their GI education bill. Are you all set up for that? And if so, how do you do that? And if not, is that a possibility?
We don't handle the financial aspects of veterans or licensees or students who want to become licensed. That's handled between the student and the schools. We're not involved in that, but I could have the schools give me a report of whether they accept the GI benefits or not.
Thank you. That would be important because I know that's one of the areas that I've received a number of calls in terms of how do we do this? We have this information, we have this benefit, and this is what we want to do, but it doesn't appear that there's any way for us to use this to offset some of the costs. So we can talk about it offline, and whatever help or assistance I can be, I'm glad to do that.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for your questions. Committee members, any other questions for Executive Director Landry? Okay, Mr. Landry, I do have just a couple of questions. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer one of them. I mean, it might have to be information that you send us, but I'm going to start with my first one. You did say you have an apprenticeship program for students who live 60 miles from a school. Is that an earn while you learn type of program, or is it just completely up to the apprenticeship program? Do they decide that?
That is an earn while you learn program. It involves apprenticeship in the cosmetology salons, and they have to have a cosmetologist or nail tech or a esthetician, because we have apprenticeship programs in all those license types. They have to get a licensed individual to say that they're going to sponsor that person, and that person goes and works for them. It's double the hours, double the amount of hours, but it is kind of an earn while you learn while they're going through the program.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you. And then my second question, this is the one where I'm not sure if you'll be able to provide us the information right now, but you had mentioned that when you took over, you guys were able to reduce some of the time periods. And one of the ones I was interested in getting more information on was how the Cosmetology Board went from, when it comes to licenses from other states, you took down 21 days to approve. You went from 21 days to approve a license to 1 day to approve a license from another state when it came to reciprocity. How are you guys able to accomplish that? Like, there's just, there's some boards who are lacking in that area, and you guys went from 3 weeks to 1 day, which is great.
Well, this is Gary Landry, Executive Director of the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology. What we did is we put the information online and let the applicant fill that out and send it to us. That allowed us to get the information in. We could get it quickly, and as long as the information was complete, most people who submit reciprocity applications provide complete information. Then we review it and get it out that day. We had to do a lot of things to reduce the time involved and the number of people it went through. We got it down to where we could have one person review all the steps, review it, and approve it, and that's how we got it down to 1 day. We don't think there's a great deal of benefit in delaying the people coming in, and that's why we're working to try and get all of our processes down to a single day. Sometimes it's not possible, but we're trying to get everything down to 1 day.
Okay, and so then before, everything had to be mailed in or hand delivered to, I guess, the board, and now it's all digital.
Correct, and it went, you would not believe, it went from one person's desk to another person's to another person's. Each person was doing individual review of that particular section of the application. We took that out and made it one person reviewed the whole application.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Director Landry. Committee members, last call. Okay, well, we appreciate you being here with us, Director Landry. Thank you so much for your presentation again.
Thank you.
Okay, committee members, our next board that will be presenting is the Board of Dental Examiners of Nevada. We have, I believe, a representative from the board here.
Yes, you do.
Okay, who do we have with us from the board?
Hardeep Sul.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. When you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, honorable members of the legislature and the public. Please allow me to reintroduce myself as Hardeep Sul, also known as Dee, and I'm a newly minted director of the Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners. It is with great pride that I will be sharing the board's history, best practices, updates on recent legislation affecting our board, and any possible recommendations the board is considering for the 2023 legislative session. As you are all aware, the mission of the Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners is to protect the dental health interests of Nevadans by developing and maintaining programs to ensure that only qualified professionals are licensed to practice dentistry and dental hygiene. Ensure that violators of the law regulating the dental and dental hygiene professions are sanctioned as appropriate. Currently, we have 11 board members who are tasked with this mission, and many who are new to the board and reflective of our community and profession. Our staff is composed of 7 individuals who are dedicated servants and services of the state of Nevada and are tasked with this very important work to serve Nevadans, and one who I am proud to say is a veteran of our armed forces. During COVID-19, we were severely impacted like all Nevadans, but no doubt we rose to the occasion and ensured that we provide the very essential services to our state. As you are well aware, COVID-19 severely impacted Nevadans, but as I stated, the Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners ensured that our work continued and minimized the effects of the pandemic. With that, we adopted and posted emergency declarations, CDC recommendations, CDC recommendation adoptions, DHHS memorandum adoptions, ensured continuing education requirement adjustments and extension, processed licenses and made adjustments, postpones non-essential dental treatment and closure of dental offices, and introduced new regulations for the administration of vaccines in addition to emergency regulation for COVID-19 vaccine administration, effective March 8th, 2021. Indeed, we responded in a timely, effective, and succinct manner to serve all citizens of Nevada and our profession. For example, on March 16th, 2020, following the state of emergency issued by Governor Sisolak regarding COVID-19, the board issued a reminder that all Nevadan dental offices are required by law to follow the latest CDC recommendation for cross-contamination and infection control, which are the most stringent of the recommendations. The Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners recommended that the Nevada dental healthcare providers postpone elective procedures for the next 2 weeks and listed universal precautions and measures, including the required use of face masks and appropriate PPE as recommended by the ADA. The board also issued recommendations regarding self-quarantining in accordance with CDC guidelines. The board noted that due to the numerous cancellations of continuing education events and meetings, it would accept live webinars as alternate sources for in-person meetings. If additional time would be needed to complete continuing education requirements, a waiver form was made available. The board also indicated that it would be ready to mobilize dental offices in Nevada to serve as screening and testing centers if they should be called upon to do so by the governor, given that dental offices in Nevada are already at or above national recommendations for infection control. On March 27th, 2020, the board posted the Declaration of Emergency for COVID-19 Directive 003, issued by the state of Nevada, as well as one on March 2020 memorandum from the state of Nevada Department of Health and Human Services, and reiterated the board's support of postponement of elective dental procedures until at least April 16, 2020. On April 2nd, 2020, the board posted the Declaration of Emergency for COVID-19 Directive 010, issued by the state of Nevada, and reiterated its support of the postponement of elective dental procedures until at least April 30th, 2020. In response to inquiry by practitioners, the board also indicated that telehealth is within the scope of NRS 631.215, as moved during the public meeting in 2019. On April 8th, 2020, the board announced that the NDA had organized a response team to help equip Nevada hospitals and urgent care facilities with PPE material and urged practitioners with PPE to spare to contact the NDA. April 13, 2020, the board referenced the interim infection prevention and control guidance for dental settings during COVID-19 responses as recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The board repeated that if emergency dental treatment is medically needed for a patient with known or suspected COVID-19, airborne infection precautions and parameters should be strongly considered, and if treatment is offered for dental emergencies, customary infection control protocols should continue to be followed. April 29, 2020, the board reiterated that according to NAC 631.178, practitioners in Nevada must comply with CDC guidelines and issued a reminder that services should be limited to emergency visits only during the period of the pandemic, and that all elective procedures, surgeries, and non-urgent dental visits be postponed until further notice. Again, on April 30th, 2020, board telephone conference meeting, the board voted to adopt portions of guidance for dental services in Nevada memorandum issued by the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services, effective Monday, May 4th, 2020. On July 16, in a July 14, 2020 board telephone conference meeting, the board voted to approve and adopt the CDC's interim dental settings guidelines updated June 17, 2020, pursuant to NAC 631.178, and no longer follow the guidance for dental services in Nevada DHHS memorandum that it had previously adopted at the April 30th board meeting. The board posted a copy of the current CDC guideline for reference. September 16, 2020, the board provided contact information for CDC COCA, which is a clinician outreach and communication activity for practitioners to utilize, as well as posted the CDC interim reopening guidance for dental settings, updated on April 28, 2020. The board posted a copy of the current CDC guidelines for reference. November 30th, 2020, at its October 8th, 2020 board telephone conference meeting, the board voted to approve the CDC's interim dental settings guideline pursuant to NAC 631.178 with modifications to allow for the use of N95 or equivalent, namely a level 3 surgical mask or face shield eye protection, and to not approve the CDC's interim dental settings guidelines updated April 4th, 2020. The board did reiterate that and per NAC 631.178, licensed dentists and dental hygienists in Nevada shall comply with CDC guidelines for dental health settings, which now include the CDC's August 28, 2020 interim dental settings guidelines with modifications that allow the use of N95 or equivalent. The board did post a copy of the current CDC guidelines for reference. February 10th, 2020, as its January 5th, 2021 board telephone conference meeting, the board voted to approve the CDC's interim dental settings guidelines, which was updated on December 4th, 2020, pursuant to NAC 631.178, with the modification that where the guidelines recommend use of the N95 respirators, licensees can instead use the combination of a level 3 surgical mask, face shield, and eye protection. June 1st, 2021, the board issued a memorandum to all licensees regarding updates to the CDC guidelines and interim dental settings. As you are aware, the mission of the State Board of Examiners is to protect the dental health interests of Nevadans by developing and maintaining programs to ensure that only qualified professionals are licensed to practice in dentistry and dental hygiene, and ensure that violators of the law regulating the dental and dental hygiene professions are sanctioned as appropriate. As you can tell, the Nevada State Board of Dental Examiners not only rose to the occasion, but made certain that our mission was not deterred even by a pandemic. We were particularly pleased with the dental profession as a whole, who limited infections in a time where almost nothing was known of COVID-19, and placing members of the profession in a very volatile situation where when you were dealing with individual saliva, which, as you may recall, was a very scary issue to deal with, especially when members of the public were advised to wipe down groceries and surfaces. In respect to licensing, we have 2,061 dentists and 1,590 hygienists that are active. As was mentioned earlier, the board remained flexible and made the appropriate adjustments to ensure that we serve the members of the public in the state of Nevada. In addition, please know that applicants for active or retired military or spouses of military personnel do have the ability for reciprocal licensure. Currently, we are working on the following regulations: immunization administration, dental therapy, disciplinary process, and licensing. When we speak of immunization administration, under this regulation, our licensees have the option to file for special endorsement to administer vaccinations in their own practice settings. In respect to the dental therapy, we have been working on this during 2020, and a regulatory workshop was held in October 2020. In respect to disciplinary process, the proposed changes are to mirror the changes requested by the governor's auditors pursuant to the 2019 audit of NSBDE. Lastly, as to license, proposed changes, among other things, reflect newly formed dental specialties that have been approved and update our CPR requirements. We do look forward to ensuring that our mission is fulfilled, which is to maintain the dental interests of all Nevadans by developing and maintaining programs to ensure that only qualified members, professionals are licensed to practice dentistry and dental hygiene, ensure that violators of the law regulating the dental and dental hygiene professions are sanctioned as appropriate. And with that, I give you back the floor. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I think I was on mute, but I just wanted to say congratulations. I know this is a recent appointment for you in the last couple of weeks or so, so congratulations on your new role. And I do just have one ask. Would you mind sharing your remarks with our committee secretary so that we can have those, just some of that information for the committee members to access? With that, I'm going to go to the members to see if we have any questions. I know Vice Chair Spearman reached out to me that she has some questions, so I'm going to turn the floor over to her.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report. I have a question, and I wanted to direct your attention to, there is an agenda for October 29th, 2021, and it looks like it's a continuation. As a matter of fact, at the top of the agenda, it says continuance of formal hearing and agenda for Antonina Capuro, day 14. So my question is, it looks like this person has been on the agenda for quite a while. Can you tell me why that is, and if there's anything unusual going on that would require the person to be a part of the agenda for such a long time?
Yes, Senator Spearman, and Hardeep Sel for the record. This just is, because it is an ongoing disciplinary matter, I can't get into it very much, but I do want you to know that there's nothing improper going on. It is, unfortunately, with the pandemic and just the way the hearings were being handled, they were in the evenings, just so you know. So after hours, after like usually between 6 and 9. So this was, it's an ongoing disciplinary matter, and obviously I can't really comment to the specifics, but I can attest I have reviewed, the documents as well, Senator Spearman.
Yeah, so
and-
let me just, I hate to interrupt you, but I do need
Absolutely.
to say this. This was a matter that was brought to my attention during session. And I understand that it's a personal matter, but I do need to get on the record that it is great concern. Senator Hardy and myself looked into it, and there have been some other people looking into it. And you can't discuss the particulars of it, but I will say this, that I am really concerned that, and I can't find of another instance where there has been someone who's been on the agenda of a regulatory board consistently. And as noted here, day 14. So I am really concerned about this, and I really would like to get some clarification about this offline. Second question that I would have is, I've also been getting calls from people who are members of the dental family, shall I say, who have some concerns about the way that disciplinary action is being administered. And it does not look like it has been done fairly across the board. I will tell you that it came to my attention because of some legislation that we passed regarding racism as a public health crisis. So the first question is, do you have information on the demographic makeup of the dental board? Second one that is related to that, demographic makeup of people who apply for licensure, not just veterans, but demographic in terms of women. What does that look like in terms of BIPOC communities? How many people are accepted? How many people are licensed? What is the disciplinary, the demographic makeup of the disciplinary action? Am I going too fast? Am I going too fast? Okay, the disciplinary action. And it also come to my attention that there have been some instances where people who were previously cleared of any type of improprieties, there have been some reopening of the investigations. And so I'd really like to see that information, because as short as we are on dentists here in the state, and when I get calls from people who are outside the state who are wanting to come to Nevada, and they say to me that they're not coming because of some instances of some things that don't look quite right. Why would they come to Nevada when they can and risk losing their license when they can go to another state that's close to Nevada? And so we have issues with respect to the number of dentists in this state, and that's not just general practice, but that's people who are who are in specialty practice. So I really need to know why the individual keeps showing up on the agenda. And I know that there are some unique things around this individual that do cause me concern from the standpoint of are there some things that we should be paying particular attention to with respect to the differently able community. I also need to know about the demographic information of disciplinary action. How many, what does that look like? BIPOC, what does that look like? Gender, what does that look like in terms of socioeconomic status? What does that look like in terms of someone who has been previously cleared and then a case being reopened? Right now, these are all allegations, but if you can provide that information to me, then I can set those allegations aside and I can get back to the people who are asking these questions, that information. One of the things that concerns me, and this is something that I brought up in 2019, and that is the court case in North Carolina with the dental board in North Carolina. And I said this as a matter of record in 2019, and I'll say it again, and I said it in 21. And so I'll say it here in this meeting, that there do appear to be some similarities that led to that case. And I just need to make sure that the state is not being put in jeopardy, in any type of legal jeopardy, because the people who would pay for any type of lawsuit are we, the people who already pay taxes here. And so it's the Nevada State Dental Board, which means that we are the people who are paying for whatever lawsuits or even any settlements to come about. So I'm concerned about that, and I need to make sure that we're not anywhere close to that that line where the North Carolina Dental Board was, because I don't want to see taxpayers have to pay for something that could be avoided if there was more judicious activity going on with respect to the people who are licensed, people who are applying, and even staff personnel. So that's my concern right there. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
So let me break this down a little bit and try to respond to as much of it as I can. And so let's go back to the first item that was to the Caparo matter. Just for the record, it was originally scheduled for 2 full days, May 21st and May 22nd. And the second day was not able to go forward due to religious observances of the participants in proceedings. And so we honored that, just so that you're well aware of that. In regards to the issues with how disciplinary, actions are being handled and the info on demographic makeup, whom applies, our applications collect some of that information, of the demographic information. I'm going to go ahead and check on the disciplinary demographics. I am also a woman of color, so I am going to be sitting there. I look into those matters very seriously, and we want to have an even hand, but very transparent, and being just fair to all Nevadans, just equal to everyone. And so, Senator Spearman, I hear what you're saying, and it is a grave concern to me, not only as an individual, but as the executive director, that nothing improper happens on the state's dime, and so we are here to serve the public. And obviously we don't want to risk the public in anything. And that goes back to the mission. When it comes to investigations, technically we're there to, investigate basically the, sanctioned activities that our members can do, but not go beyond that. It is not, neither do we have the budget to be able to be reopening, old cases, and that's not typical. I think that the only way that happens, just so, I've been informed of recently, was that if someone would have to complain again in something and there would be a new issue in it. I don't know of any at this point of anything that was reopened. And obviously offline, I'm happy to discuss that, and I want to make sure that we are operating right into the purview of what our mandate is. And that is my mission. As the executive director, I will remind everyone, I know that there may be some testy, history, but I am also a member of, the bar. And so I take that very seriously. I take service to the public and to the legislature, transparency and fairness and rule of law to be very big hallmarks in not only my career as an attorney, but really my next step in, elevating the in this position as an executive director. So I will, say I commit to that, to you all. And, I am always accessible to the members of the public and the legislature, because that's what we're here to do, is to serve as that, but, within the purview of our mandate. And that's what I'm tasked with too. So I hope you appreciate that. And I'm happy to answer and make my comments available, as well.
And I do. And I just want, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you so much. And please, let's get together offline, because I am getting more and more of these calls, and they are concerning to me. They started long before the 2021 session, but throughout the 2021 session, and I'm sure you know of that, there were some particular areas of, shall I say, interest that came before myself and Senator Hardy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for those questions. And Director Sull, if you do gather that information, if you would please, instead of sending it directly to Vice Chair, if you would send it to our policy analyst, if you gather the information on the demographics, so that it can be shared with the entire committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. Okay, and thank you so much for your presentation, Director Sol. We appreciate you and congratulations again on the new appointment. Okay, members, we are going to move on to our third board, which is the board, the State Board of Nursing. And I believe we have the Executive Director here, Ms. Kathy Denauer, with us to present. Ms. Denauer, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chairperson Howdigi and members of the committee. My name is Kathy Denauer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada State Board of Nursing. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I have provided information to you about the board, and I'll just review it and go over some of the highlights. The Nevada State Board of Nursing is a Title 54 board made up of 7 governor-appointed members, and we are a self-funded board. We do not take any general funding. And the main functions of the Nevada State Board of Nursing is to license and certify, to provide an oversight of our nursing programs, and discipline and compliance. We have a compliance program, which is a program that we run in-house for nurses who are experiencing substance use disorders. And we want to keep them in the field, but we also have to monitor them. The mission of the State Board of Nursing is to protect the public's health and safety and welfare through effective regulation. And this includes helping prospective nurses with proper view of their applications and issuing a license to qualified applicants. Currently, we license and certify just over 70,000 individuals. And that includes registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, certified nursing assistants, advanced practice registered nurses, and certified registered nurse anesthetists. We also process approximately 7,700 applications every year. And that just seems to be growing every year. We also we pride ourselves on issuing a temporary license within about 4 to 6 days. And even with COVID, we've been able to continue that. We have an online application process, which has greatly helped not only those nurses who are wanting to get a license, but for the staff as well, because we are able to process licenses via our online system. We have nurses in our state are required to fingerprint. So we have 2 offices, one in Reno, one in Las Vegas, where we have the ability to fingerprint nursing applicants. And even during COVID, we've kept a minimum staff, but enough staff so that we can continue that process. We have our licensure fees that we have not increased in over 20 years, and don't seem to be any plans to increase that, but one never knows. But they have not changed in 20 years. And I currently work with a variety of different stakeholders in looking at different ways to streamline our processes and to not be a barrier to licensure. Our best practices are through scientific literature, research. We look at best practice positions through national nursing organizations, and we are also have a membership with the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, which is an organization of which we and all 50 states belong to, and that provides us with an opportunity to look at research and studies and what other boards are doing, and they do provide great information on making sure that we are in compliance with regulatory requirements. So with regards to recent legislation, in the 2021 legislative session, the Board of Nursing was active in passing AB 91, which mandated that an APRN become a permanent member of our board. Prior to that, we have been fortunate enough to have nurse practitioners or APRNs on our board, but it wasn't a requirement. So this bill will now require that an APRN become part of the board, which is really important since we have over 4,000 nurse practitioners in our state. In addition, as has been discussed in earlier presentations today about the Nursing Licensure Compact, we have tried several times to pass the Nurse Licensure Compact and have been unsuccessful. This last session, we unsuccessfully attempted to get it passed and introduced into session, and we were not able to do that. But our board has been very supportive of the Nurse Licensure Compact. I've worked with other stakeholders, including Kelly Douglas, who spoke earlier, and it's just unfortunate we were not able to get that passed. Currently, we are working with the Department of Public and Behavioral Health on working on making some regulatory changes that would allow our nursing assistants and apprentice nurses to perform point of care testing, which is lab tests, to allow them to do glucometer finger sticks, which is a task that many nurses do in their everyday existence, and this would help offset some of their workload. And I'll talk about that a little bit as I talk about COVID. So with COVID, COVID hit us just like everyone else, and now we are seeing this enormous nursing shortage throughout the country, and especially in Nevada. And we at the Board of Nursing, what we don't want to do is be a barrier to practice in any way. And we don't believe we are. We can issue a temporary license in a relatively short amount of time. We have accepted waivers. We have received over 5,500 waivers, which allows nurses to come to the state and begin working without having to get a Nevada license, as long as they have a license or certificate in another state. We have minimum staff working in our offices at any given time, but we are still able to process fingerprints and applications as necessary. We've been working with the Department of Public and Behavioral Health and healthcare facilities with regards to the nursing shortage, and recently working through the governor's office on our apprentice program. We do have an apprentice program. It's been around for a very long time, but I'm not sure that it was as well known to students and facilities as it is probably now. And that is because of ongoing discussions with facilities and nursing students. We have about 900 students in nursing programs at various levels of their instruction. And working with facilities, we have facilities around the state that have apprentice programs in the north, the south, even in the rural areas. And it really is a great opportunity to allow that student, while they are a nursing student, to work at a facility and perform the skills that they have been taught in their program. And so we're constantly pushing out that program, and hopefully we'll be able to extend it to other types of facilities. We have been posting messages to all of our 70,000 licensee and certificate holders about volunteering for Battle Born Nevada. I myself am a volunteer with Battle Born Nevada. It's a wonderful group, and I've had the opportunity to provide some volunteer work. As I mentioned, we have had over 5,500 waivers that have been received, that we are continuing to get on a daily basis. And then we just continue to work with our ongoing with our stakeholders in the community to look at how we can help the nursing shortage and increase the nursing pipeline. And I will entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, Director Denauer. Committee members, do you have any questions for Director Denauer? Okay, and I have a question for you, Director Denauer. The apprenticeship program, it's actually the first time I hear of it for a nursing license. How long has it been around? And do you know how many, and I don't know if you have this number off the top of your head, but do you know how many licenses have been in totality issued through the apprenticeship program?
So thank you, Kathy Denauer, for the record there. Thank you, Chairwoman Housekeeping. I can't say how many people have actually completed an apprenticeship program, but it has been around for well over 20 years. And it is a great opportunity for the student. It's a relationship between the student and a facility. The student nurse has to be enrolled in an accredited program of nursing, and then they are hired by a facility, and that allows them to perform the skills that they've learned in school. And it really turns out to be a win-win for everyone, because the facility gets an opportunity to see how that student is going to perform during the time when they're in school, get an orientation. So when they graduate, that transition to practice, that time frame may be shorter. It's great for the student because then the student gets an opportunity to get to know the facility. We know of one facility here in the north that has hired apprentice nurses into their specialty areas, which might not normally have happened 5-10 years ago. So we're seeing this increased interest in apprentice programs, and we have a list of all of our apprentice facilities. We have that listed on our website, and we currently know that about 350 to 375 nursing students are currently employed as apprentice nurses. And I get requests almost daily from facilities wanting to start a program.
I know, and I appreciate that because I'm assuming you said they're employed. So these apprenticeships, while they're going to school, they're also earning and earning in their field of study, which is great. Okay, I do have a question from Vice Chair. I think I'm doing a show of hands. And so before I let you go, I'm going to go to Vice Chair so she can ask her questions. Vice Chair Spearman.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Kathy, for your presentation. I just got a real quick question. We've done a lot with respect to how our nurses are taking care of patients. My question would be, how are we taking care of those who take care of us? Any EAP protocols in place? What are we doing to make sure that, I know I've heard from some that, you know, because the numbers keep spiking, there's a bit of a, how should I put it? They're getting a little discouraged because every time they feel like we're just about through that phase and something else happens. So how are we taking care of those who are taking care of us? What does that look like from their mental health? What does that look like in terms of protecting the families and their own personal health for that matter?
Thank you, Senator Spearman, Kathy Denauer for the record. And we at the Board of Nursing don't have any regulatory oversight of what programs may be available for nurses. I can only speak to you anecdotally in maybe other groups such as the Nevada Hospital Association may know. What I do hear anecdotally from nurses in the field and nurses at the bedside is that there is a high burnout. Nurses are leaving the profession. And I do know that there are facilities who have implemented EAP programs, as you mentioned, and there are other services for nurses to get help, hopefully the help that they need.
Okay, thank you. I'm concerned about that because we have to take care of those who are taking care of us. So thank you so much.
Great question, Vice Chair. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, for Director Denauer. Thank you for being here with us and for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thanks for hanging in there. I know it's around lunchtime, but we just have a couple more boards. So let's go ahead and move forward with the Board of Medical Examiners. And I believe we have the Deputy Executive Director, Ms. Sarah Bradley, here to present.
Yes, ma'am, I am here. Sarah Bradley, Deputy Executive Director of the Nevada State Board of Medical Examiners. Oh, sorry, I was a little bit off center there for a second. So a little bit about our board. It's a Title 54 licensing board, and we have 9 members that are appointed by the governor. 6 of those are medical doctors licensed by the board, and 3 of them are public members. I'm excited to say that one of our newest members and newest public member is actually a retired Air Force colonel. We also have 7 members of the 9 in the South, and 2 of them are located in the Reno area. So the board was created on March 15th, 1899, and it's the oldest licensing board in the state. The board is governed by the Nevada Medical Practice Act, which is codified in NRS and NAC Chapter 630. We have 2 investigative committees. So the investigative committees are made up of board members. So we have 2 physicians and 1 public member that actively review complaints and cases that are received by the board and determine the appropriate disciplinary action that should occur. If there's a settlement agreement or other resolution of a case, the investigative committee would approve that before it goes to the public member. So they act as part of the investigative arm. And again, it's 2 physicians and 1 public member. The board has a physician assistant advisory committee, and we also have an advisory committee of the respiratory practitioners of respiratory care, as well as perfusionists. And those are 3 other license types that the board issues in addition to medical doctors. The board's mission statement is to protect the public and serve the state of Nevada by ensuring that only well-qualified, competent physicians, physician assistants, practitioners of respiratory care, and perfusionists receive licenses to practice in Nevada. The board responds with expediency to complaints against our licensees by conducting fair, complete investigations that result in appropriate action. In all board activities, the board shall place the interests of the public before the interests of the medical profession and encourage public input and involvement to help educate the public as we improve the quality of medical practice in Nevada. I have provided a handout that I hope all of the members have received, just with some information regarding licensing, disciplinary actions, and some significant accomplishments. So just to highlight, COVID did not slow down our operations at all. In fact, we issued, as you can see on the handout, there were 1,648 new licenses issued in 2020 and 1,675 licenses issued in 2021. And that is an increase over previous years. The total number of licensees in the state, and this includes active and inactive, is 14,436. Of those, 10,767 are medical doctors, 1,348 are physician assistants, 1,759 are practitioners of respiratory care, 71 are perfusionists, and then we have 491 residency training licenses. So those are individuals who have completed their medical school. They are licensed, they are supervised by a medical doctor while they complete their residency, and they are providing care though to Nevada citizens. We've seen an increased number of complaints in 2021. In 2021, we opened 1,015 investigations, and that's an increase of almost double. The last time I reported this information for 2020, we were, I want to say, about 542. So the number of complaints we've received and open investigations on has increased, but so has our licensed population. In 2021, 725 of those investigations, and it may be some from the prior year, so I can't say that all of them that were received in 2021 were dealt with in 2021, but 725 investigations were closed, 46 resulted in disciplinary action, public disciplinary action, and so the total number of closed investigations was 771. The most frequent kinds of complaints that we get is regarding standard of care, which I think makes sense. Patients, there's either concern from a patient, their family, another healthcare practitioner regarding care received. Prescribing issues, we continue to address those issues. We actually have been meeting with the pharmacy board as well as other entities to try to make sure we are acting appropriately regarding prescribing cases and issues and reviewing things that may come from that. Demeanor is another popular complaint. These don't often result in public action, but certainly the board takes it seriously when a patient complains regarding how they were treated by a physician. And it's not uncommon for those individuals to have to address the investigative committee regarding their possible demeanor issue. Records, we get complaints both regarding patients saying that they haven't received records in a timely manner after a request, or that records aren't timely, accurate, legible, or complete. And that's an issue, obviously, as you can imagine, because if the record isn't detailed enough, other healthcare practitioners may not have information they need when treating patients. And so it's actually a very serious issue, not having complete and accurate records. And so we do look at those a lot. We've done some significant accomplishments. One of the things we're very excited about is last year in early 2021, we launched a new licensing software that allows all of our applications, as well as a licensee portal. It's all online. And so licensees can actually go in, they can log in, they can update their address and other information right away without having to send a form into the office. They also can update other information for us, as well as do the renewals online. We've always had online renewals. Well, not always, but in recent years we have, but it's greatly impacted our ability to do online applications and online renewals. As far as outreach and education, COVID has impacted that slightly, but we did do a presentation last year to the physician assistant program at UNR. We did present that in person and basically gave an overview of how the board works, Nevada law, things they should know as they become new licensees. And then we've also increased our staffing both prior to COVID and during COVID in order to help better manage and serve our licensees and the public. So We have just hired a new person, and so our new count from 2020, the increased total is actually eight new staff members, new positions that have been created, both in legal, investigations, licensing. Those are our new position areas. We also have one that's in administration. So that helps us do a better job in supporting the individuals we need to support. There was a lot of talk today regarding the licensure compact, and I wanted to let members of the committee know that the Nevada State Board of Medical Examiners has been a member of the medical licensure compact since it was enacted in Nevada in 2015. That was when the law passed to allow it. And it took us a little bit of time before we started getting applications. So the notes I have is we probably got our first applications in 2017. The total number of licenses we've issued through the compact is 1,434, and that's just for medical doctors. It's not any other license type because the compact is only for medical doctors, whether they're osteopathic physicians or medical doctor, either of those physician types. So we've licensed 1,434. It takes, usually it takes 0 to 10 days, depending on weekends and holidays, for us to actually issue a license. Generally speaking, I think our average is the next business day when we receive the application through the compact for them to be licensed in Nevada. We haven't seen increasing numbers though through the compact the longer we've had it. In 2021, we issued 457 licenses through the compact, again for physicians, and just in January alone this year, 26. So that's our 1 month total is 26. And then if they would like, once physicians are licensed, either traditionally or through the compact, they can actually change to have Nevada be their primary state. It's called State of Principal Licensure. And so we've issued 283 of those since we started with the compact, and in 2021, 112. So you can see that the number of people getting licensed in Nevada and then wanting to have Nevada be their principal licensure state has been increasing, because almost half of the number we've received was all last year. So we are excited about the compact, and I was excited to hear too that the Department of Defense Liaison believed that was a helpful thing for allowing reciprocity for military spouses and veterans. So we're glad to be a part of that. I also want to tell you that our executive director actually had served on the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Committee for quite some time. He's now a part of the board of directors of the Federation of State Medical Boards, but the Federation of State Medical Boards is definitely a supporter of the compact, the Medical Licensure Compact, as is our board and our staff. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director Bradley. I appreciate you being here and for the presentation. I have one question because my internet was a little spotty as you were reading those numbers. And you did say that since inception, there's been 1,434 licenses issued through the compact?
Yes, that's the number, 1,434.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure I wrote that down correctly. So if a doctor in a neighboring state just comes in, submits their application for licensure, they can be here and practicing within 10 days, you said, correct?
Well, it's not necessarily a neighboring state, Madam Chair, Sarah Bradley for the record.
A state that's part of the compact.
Yeah, they have to be a member of the compact. And so, for example, I don't believe California is a member, and obviously they're very close to us. So there are 32 states that are members of the compact. And of course, that number is growing. I just checked the website this morning, and New Jersey was added recently. So if they are in a member state, yes, 0 to 10 days. And I would say the 10 days is a longer, that's if we have weekends and holidays in the middle, because generally speaking, we get a letter from their state of principal licensure that says Dr. Smith, for example, is licensed, through the here's their letter of qualification is what we call it. And basically once we receive that and they pay their fee, they're licensed. It's usually the next business day. It's very fast. And we do think it's a good thing to help with mobility.
Thank you, and help with our shortage of providers. Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, thank you so much, Deputy Director Bradley. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the information that you provided. Members, we are going to move on to our last presentation from the board. We have the State Board of Osteopathic Medicine, And I believe we have executive, yes, she is. I just saw her on her camera, Executive Director Sandy Reed here to present. So Ms. Reed, when you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. Hi, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Sandy Reed. I'm the Executive Director for over 5 years for the Nevada Board of Osteopathic Medicine. You have an information sheet that I provided that I will be going through. And if you have any questions in the end, please feel free to ask. The mission of the board is to protect and safeguard the public by licensing and disciplining well-educated and competent doctors of osteopathy and physician assistants. So those are the two types of licenses that we issue. The board was formally formed on July 1st, 1977, though osteopathic physicians were able to get licenses before that, probably under the Board of Medical Examiners. But the Osteopathic Board is governed by NRS 633 and NAC 633. We have our own statute. The board consists of 7 members, 5 of whom are osteopathic physicians, 2 are public members, 1 who must represent the interests of persons or agencies that are indigent or uninsured or unable to afford health care. The board has 4 full-time staff, myself, executive director, an investigator, a license specialist, and an administrative assistant / licensing assistant. And we're kind of a small board. And currently, we have about 2,433 total licensees, which is osteopathic physicians, physician assistants, residents, and those who come through the compact, which I'll mention a little bit later. The board is a member of the Federation of State Medical Boards, Administrators in Medicine, which is an administrative membership for executive directors and those who are typically not in the medical field for support, and the National Practitioner Data Bank, which tracks disciplinary actions or, reports, background checks on all the licensees. The board adheres to all, for best practices, adheres to all statutes, regulations, and we always are looking to strive to improve our processes. Since we've noticed that our number of licensees has increased, we found that we needed to reevaluate our license database system. So upon doing that, we decided to implement and revise a new database system, which we are in the process of contracting with right now. The board has approved a company, which other boards use as well, so they come highly recommended, and we are in the process of contracting with them. And by using them, that will facilitate our licensing, initial applications. They can go online, which they can do now, but it'll be an easier process. Each licensee can create their own portal. They can renew their application, pay online, upload all their continuing education credits. We can manage complaints easier, track reports. It'll be a much improved and much anticipated process that we're excited to have. And this way we can work efficiently and maybe maintain our small staff, because we're not as large as some of the other boards. We just want to do continuous improvement. The board followed and adhered to all the governor's emergency directives under COVID. When he issued the first directives in March 2020, the board staff worked from home, but went into the office separately and individually to process mail and documents. So work continued, people got licensed, there was no real interruption. As time went on and restrictions were loosened, when the governor said the board offices can now have public meetings under Directive 44 on June 1st of last year, we opened the office, but we made sure all the staff was vaccinated. We always followed CDC guidelines. We post them. Any people that come in from the public must wear masks, and we now work in a hybrid environment because a lot of people seem to enjoy working from home as well as going to work. So we work 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home. As you can see, I'm working from home. This is sort of my office / jewelry room. But it's worked very well, and the staff has been happy, and all the licensees have been attended to, any matters that we have to address. So recent legislation that passed, we haven't had major impacts, but we know that SB 184, which allowed PAs, physician assistants, to be licensed dually from the Board of Medical Examiners and the Osteopathic Board, that we've been implementing that, but at the time we have 5 applications in the process of dual applicants. Most of them are from people who are newly graduated. And then we also, we don't charge them to go inactive. To become inactive, we used to charge that fee. And we also don't require the National Commission of Certification of Physician Assistants to be certified every year. So the process has become a little bit easier for them. The proposed legislation for 2023, what we've been discussing is, since our board annually renews all our licensees on December 31st, and we have a small staff and we keep increasing our license numbers, we were thinking that maybe it's best to renew half our licensees 1 year and the other half another year, like even in odd years, maybe by alphabet. So that may make it a little easier for the staff and for the licensees. This way they'd only have to renew every 2 years. And we would also look into, currently we audit 33% of our licensees annually. And last year it was almost 600 people. And that was quite a bit because they have to send in all their CME credits, their continuing education credits. And we're looking at possibly maybe reducing that percentage to be more in line with some other boards that we see what they do, 10 to 15%. We'll be discussing that and have as time goes on. But those are the only things that we see at this time that might be legislative that we'll look into. As I stated earlier, we have through December 31st of last year, we have 2,433 total licenses. We have about 1,600 active DOs. We have about 161 active PAs. For the compact, we have licensed 135 to date. That's the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, which the legislature voted to enact in 2015 and went live in 2017. The good thing about the compact is once we get everyone's application in and they meet the requirements, they can be licensed immediately. And it could be 10 days or less. It just depends on when we get everything in. And that has moved the process dramatically. I know we don't have as many as other boards, but we are a smaller board as far as osteopathic physician numbers. But they are increasing partly because I think the residency opportunities have expanded in the state. And so we are, like I said, we are seeing larger numbers, which is a good thing. Another thing we did to expand licensing is we reduced our fees under a regulation in 2019, which went into effect January 1st, 2020. We lowered them by $100, the initial application and the renewals, and not every fee, but most of the ones that were a little bit higher. And so that we think may have assisted with bringing on more licensees as well. Plus, we also removed the requirement that they had to send in their applications or their medical papers and their transcripts through the Federation Credentialing Verification Service. They could still do that, but we now allow them to send the qualifying applications just from their own sources directly, which can save 30 days or more in licensing and moving them for licensing. What I'm very proud to say is our board is probably, I think, the only one. I'm not sure. There might be others. I could be wrong, but we meet every month. So, except for July. So our licenses get expedited quickly. Everyone is licensed every month. As soon as we get their applications and all the required documents, they go on the next board. And if they don't have a few documents and they wait for the next meeting, they know it's coming, like 30 days. We also license through endorsement. Those who qualify, when we get all their applications in, I'll review it, give it to the president, signs off on it. That doesn't have to go through the board to be licensed. So they're licensed through endorsement. Through the compact, the board does not have to approve it. I just sign off on it when we have all the documents, when they go through the interstate compact. So we have, I believe, a very efficient system of licensing people. If someone is active military, they do not have to pay an initial licensing fee. If they are a veteran or a spouse of military, they pay a 50% discount for the initial applications. And again, the typical licensing for anybody that goes through the regular process, not the compact or endorsement, is 30 to 60 days, depending on when we get their documents. We also subscribe to we let them get their fingerprints through the electronic system, which expedites the licensing by 30 days rather than the hard copy fingerprints. So I'm proud to say we have a very quick licensing process, and we don't have any complaints about it. We just license as many people as we can, as long as they're qualified. The board, the way the board handles complaints is on a case-by-case situation. The board does not have a committee like some other boards do. We have an individual board member who we assign complaints to, and we act on them fairly quickly. We get a complaint, we'll write a letter to the person they complained about. They can write a response. We'll do our investigation, write a summary, and send it to a board member to review. So the turnaround is fairly quick. And if it seems to be lagging, I'll send reminders to the board member. But that's how we do it. If there is discipline, it'll go before the full board to make a determination to decide that. But most of our cases are dismissed. Probably about 90% or just around that amount. We have the types of cases we get: a medical malpractice, standard of care. That's usually the largest complaint. Last year we had about 52 standard of care complaints. Medical malpractices are about 11. We get those after the case has been settled. Like I said, because we have a smaller board, we don't have as many complaints as maybe some larger boards. Haven't really noticed a difference in the size, the amount of complaints. We have gotten some about licensees adhering to COVID protocol, which again, the board takes on a case-by-case basis. Let me see. We do conduct outreach. Well, we did more before COVID. We often, like twice a year, speak to Touro University students of physician assistants and doctors of osteopath. We tell them information about our board and what to expect. We go over the statute. We also work with other boards about anything that we need to share, either medical boards, or I'm also a member of the Administrative Collaborative, which is an organization brought together for all the state boards in Nevada, no matter what type of board it is. It doesn't have to be medical. It's just all state board executive directors, and we share information and support each other. And that has been very helpful. anytime we get information about COVID, because we take COVID seriously and we follow the CDC guidelines in our office, I make sure to put all that information on our website. Our website lists all the resources, and also in our newsletter. We just sent a recent newsletter to all of our licensees and interested parties. And I think there was a question about burnout and emotional distress. And in our newsletter, we actually have an article about physician burnout and a list of resources available for them from either from the American Osteopathic Association for wellness, general wellness and burnout. So we thought that was really important because these have been trying times for everybody. And I think that's it. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Reed. I appreciate all the information. I am going to go to our committee members first. Committee members, do you have any questions for Director Reed? Okay, I think Director Reed, there's a benefit to being the last presenter. I think everyone's burnt out and hungry. It's lunch. No, we really appreciate you being here and for the information that you have sent. We appreciate the expedited processes, the expedited process in issuing the licenses. Again, we've heard a lot of discussion throughout today's meeting about how important that is to get people working as soon as they move to Nevada, especially our military spouses who, again, are often relocating and from state to state and have to go through this process. So thank you. We appreciate that. Members, I'm going to do one last check. Any questions? Okay, well, thank you, Director Reed. We appreciate the presentation. Okay, committee members, we are getting to our last agenda item, public comment. So before we take our first caller, I'm just going to remind everyone listening and calling in that public comment must be kept to 3 minutes so that everyone interested in speaking can be accommodated. Remember, you have 4 methods to submit public comment. You can call in, you can email, you can mail, and you can fax. With that, I am going to ask BPS if there is anyone waiting on the line to make public comment.
Chair, your public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Okay, then members, with that concludes our meeting for today. We will need to, I would like to let you know that our next meeting is scheduled for April 5th, 2022. So we will not be meeting in March. Our next meeting again is scheduled for April 5th, 2022, beginning at 9 p.m. Thank you, committee members. Our meeting's adjourned.
Okay, thank you.